Thursday. How are we doing today? A little nip in the air, but life is doing good. Okay, at this point, if we can get going with city council briefings, and the first one will be the Center for Global Diplomacy. Dr. Theron Williams, requested by Council Member Wooten. Welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm happy to introduce to you today Dr. Theron Williams with the Center for Global Diplomacy. Dr. Williams is the founder and chairman CEO of the Center for Global Diplomacy. He's also the principal owner of Theron Global, the presiding prelate of Churches in One Accord, the chancellor of the School of Diplomatic Leadership Online, as well as the founder of Career Innovations of America. He's also a member of the Virginia Beach Mayor's Ideas Council, the Health Service Advisory Board, and serves as chair of the Network of Regional Advocacy. Dr. Williams has earned a PhD, a Master's of Business Administration, and a Bachelor's of Science degrees, as well as having received an Honorary Doctorate of Divinity, an Executive Development Certification, and is a certified professional coach. He gives counsel to government officials, educators, faith leaders, community leaders, business owners, and corporate execs. He has authored several books and is married to Dr. Grace Williams. Dr. Williams has put together a video of the work that he and his team do, and I welcome him to the podium for his presentation.
And thank you. Good doctor, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Well, thanks for having me, Mr. Mayor and City Council. It's always my pleasure to be in any space where our city officials are. I thought it would be better if I were to put together a video presentation of what we do at Center for Global Diplomacy. There are a lot of faces around the table I know and recognize, and then there are some new faces that I recognize and know, and some I do not know. But I thought it would be good that I would show you the video. You would get an opportunity to see what the work is that we do over at the center. I brought two young men with me who I thought for 30 seconds it would be good that you would hear from them, because we're working with them in Career Innovations of America, which is a program of Center for Global Diplomacy. So if you would like to start the video, and we could look at it and kind of let the work speak for itself.
But this freezer has it, so we need to get that stuff to freeze by January.
Hello, my friend.
How's it going?
It's going good. How y'all doing? Those were the packaging and staging. As you can see, food distribution won't be until another hour and a half, and cars are already lined up. That's one of the volunteers there. But cars will be lined up all around the mall going out to Rosemont.
This is the line for the free food giveaway for c4gd.org on the Saturday before Thanksgiving. It's just a showing of the line at 10 o'clock a.m. The line stretches all the way around the building for this food drive on November the 20th. The cars are wrapped around the Chimney Hill Shopping Center, on the backside of Chimney Hill Shopping Center. Hello.
I so appreciate everything that you have done for this community. It has put food on my table, fresh food on the table, and helped us to do other things like Christmas coming up. And we've all had a little bit of problems going on the past few years. Not only did you help my family fight food-wise, you helped our spirit. And that's what we need. We need hope. And you've given us hope, and we appreciate you so very much, what you've done for us and the community.
Good morning, Ms. Henderson. This is our third Saturday food giveaway. Would you like to comment on how this food giveaway is helping you and your family?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to say thank you so much. I'm a faithful member of your donation drive, and it's been a help to me and my family. And every time I come out here, I'm so grateful for all the good givings that you give away.
Okay, thank you so much. You have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Likewise, do the same. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, bye-bye.
This is Tuesday night, market night, Center for Global Diplomacy. This is our first giveaway of the year, and we are in the Chimney Hill community, and I just thought it would be great to take you in on this market evening of what we do and how we do it. There's just so many people out here from all tongues, all nations, all ethnicities, and they're here doing their own shopping. That's what we hope for them to be able to do. And those people who you see with jackets or safety vests, those are all of the volunteers that come out. We've got families, they're shopping, all kinds of opportunities, foods of all kinds, foods of all kinds, all kinds. And we allow the people to shop. They just shop and they get meats, they get milks, they get all kinds of things. And this is the line. I'm walking to the line. The people come up. We give them bags that we get when we partner with other nonprofits who are so kind to sponsor bags. This is the line. The people go into during the winter months. They're into the darkness through our alley. We protect them. We put the cones out. We block off the area. We allow them to park in our parking way back in the back there. We have been providing for them for the last 5 years food. And right across the street there is our senior community. We serve that entire community, 170 senior families over there. We also, at the end of our market day, we call in community blocks. Those are groups that come in with pickup trucks or vans, and we have 7 locations that we send food to of families that are not able to get there. Happy New Year to you. Nice to meet you. Is this a blessing to you?
All the time.
All the time. Yes, this is one of our seniors that we serve. He lives across the street in the facility I was showing, and we're glad to have you. And anything we can do, let us know. Amen. Thank you. Yes. So this is how we do it. This is what we do. We kind of cover almost an entire block, from staging people to staging food, and we find ourselves where we have placed a storage facility on the backside of our hall and center, and this is where we store items that we would have other days where we can meet the needs of people. We need all the help that we can get. We need other items, other services, materials, supplies. We need literally money so that we can do a lot of the things that we know we do. Center for Global Diplomacy, changing the world with everything we do, understanding it is very, very important to be a global citizen. We're building partnerships to build better communities across the globe, and through our School of Diplomatic Leadership, we're training 21st century leaders to be all that they can be. We also provide community services where we are meeting the needs of the families in various communities around the world. Visit today, C4GD. Thank you so much. There were a lot of things that, understanding my time was short, that I thought I would leave out because I thought it would be good to concentrate on one major area of what we do. But I have 2 young men with me that I just would like for them to have 30 seconds to talk about the program, Career Innovations of America. I think in our city in Virginia Beach, when young Black men are oftentimes looking for help and support, they're finding it at the center where we serve the community. So I thought it would be good if I would just bring 2 of them with me. I've got Shane Graham with me, and I have Larry Hargrove. Why don't both of you come?
Go right ahead.
And share for a few seconds.
How y'all doing? How you doing? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shane Graham. I currently work at St. Bride's Correctional Facility as a corrections officer. So a lot of the stuff that you guys are seeing on television earlier, I get to see the aftermath of the people that don't have the things that they need in our community, and what they do and why they do that, and where they end up and how long they end up there, and what happens to them after. I unfortunately used to be one of those men. When I was younger, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I was in the streets. My father was, my family was. I got caught up in some things. One time I got in trouble and it wasn't even me doing it. It's 2023. I'm currently doing community service with Pastor Dr. Williams because of that. Every day I would go to that McDonald's that's across the street, and I'd see them early in the morning, in the afternoon, sometimes late at night, 8, 9 o'clock. I'd see tons of people out there every week. I'd see it. One day I was going to the shopping center and I seen those people out there, and I was like, let me go in there and ask them about what's going on. And Miss Thomasina, she was able to give me some information and told me to come out and gave me the opportunity to fulfill my my community service with them. And in doing that, I realized, and seeing so many people out there with their children, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of putting the pride aside to stand out there every week. And also for the people that are volunteering, they build relationships with them. They know their kids. They're taking care. It's not just something to do for them. They actually care about the well-being of these people. And I thought that that was amazing because I feel like in order for you to better your community, you have to be concerned about the people in it. You have to be contributing to it. You have to be making sure that everybody is getting a piece of something, that everybody has what they need. And that's what's most important to me, that one hand is washing the other and both of them are washing the face.
How y'all doing? My name is Larry. I recently just came home from prison not too long ago, and I ran into Dr. Williams, and he kind of been like a mentor to me. I feel like his program just represent giving everybody a second chance, no matter what their background is, where they came from, or what situation they might currently be in. He been helping me build a career portfolio so I could kind of stick to an agenda to help me find the type of work that I like to do and the career path I want to kind of take. And yeah, I just feel like that's something that'll be good for the community because everybody deserves a second chance.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I think that pretty much is the heart of everything I wake up to do. I'm effective with young Black men, and given the opportunity to do more work with them, given the proper support, the proper resources, I believe we can help turn a lot of those in the community where I serve in the right direction. So I'm glad you've invited me here. I'll take any questions or whatever
Okay, questions or comments?
comments.
Okay, Jennifer.
So I want to thank Dr. Williams and his wife, Dr. Grace, for being here. They're in my district. The organization operates out of my district. So I have had the opportunity to not only tour the space, but I know that Dr. Williams does a community day in Chimney Hill. And there's a proverb, I'm not new to this, I'm true to this. And I think Dr. Williams there's something about this organization that's truly community driven and it's institutional in Chimney Hill. And so I'm thankful to have learned about it and to see the good work that you're doing and that the public now has, that it has visibility because it's not a new thing, but it's been an ongoing thing. And I just want to commend you for the long-standing work that you and your wife and your organization has been doing.
Thank you so much. You have visited me. So has the mayor, and Councilman Berlucci has been out to our events. And, you know, we do a lot of COVID vaccinations there. We do a lot of flu shots there. I mean, we've passed out over 100,000 plus KN95 mask. I mean, we are moving every agenda, working with VDH or working with Centera or any other group that we find ourselves working with that we would be able to make impact in our community. We've got some things on our heart. We want to start some basketball groups so that we can begin to create a nexus in our community. We've been gathering names of young men, teenagers who are interested in some organized approaches to basketball. They're also excited about gaming. We're hoping that we can get some of the equipment types that we need, bring them into the hall, create gaming opportunities that are robust, even if you've got to start with Madden. We'll start there. And then I've been talking with Councilmember Jennifer about maybe working with some other STEM-related kinds of opportunities. I think we're at a precipice where there are just quite a lot of things we can do. And where I am, I have reach across the whole city of Virginia Beach, as well as the entire Hampton Road. So it's good, and thank you so much.
Okay, Rosemary.
Thank you so much for coming out today and sharing your vision and what you do. I was just curious, have you applied with the community organization grants that we do with the city? We have a committee that looks at the ask for, and especially for something like this, it would seem like it would fit in very well, but that's an organization that looks at the charitable asks.
What organization are you talking about applying with?
It's called Community for Organizational Grants. We call it COG for short.
I looked at COG, and because we're a faith-based organization, we don't qualify due to a lot of the eligibility requirements that's associated with it. When VB Relief was able to get resources out to the community, I had an opportunity to talk with Council Member Berlucci about some of the things that I thought were unnecessary for those who had grassroots points in working with communities. The IRS doesn't require a 990 from faith-based groups, so we don't consider ourselves where we need to do more than what our business status or structure requires of us. If I work with corporate organizations, they don't require that of us. We get sponsorships from them. We get grants from them, and they do not require it. I have had an opportunity to get approached through a major big box organization that the city of Virginia Beach gave funding to, who got the funding. They set up VB Thrive, and I received an email where they wanted our plant, they wanted our network, they wanted our offices, they wanted our influence for in-kind donations when they were really funded. So VB Thrive is really raised up off of CARES Act money that was for grassroots organizations. So when you're where I am, I'm right at the point of contact with all of these people. We prove our due diligence and our fiduciary responsibility to manage these resources in a high-level, productive way. And much of my concern is that we've got to revisit how we get resources to grassroots organizations that are being turned into volunteer groups to get the work done simply because their eligibility is not acceptable or they do not meet the eligibility requirements. So, and this is a space that I know quite a lot about, and there are just some things that I don't feel that it's right to make a faith-based group do when the IRS doesn't require them to do that.
So, Rod, I thought the rules had changed that we can do something for.
They have changed. Dana, would you come up for just one moment?
So yes, the General Assembly last year changed the state law restriction. So now the COG guidelines have been updated so that faith-based organizations are eligible to apply. They do have to follow the statute, which makes clear that the provision of any services from grant funds cannot be restricted by the faith-based status of recipients. So just like you saw, I mean, the line of cars was basically blind to whether they were part of a denomination or what have you. So that's all consistent with state law. I will say that the COG guidelines do require some documentation, including a 990. I don't know if the manager wants to look at those requirements, but I do know they are in the guidelines, and that may become something that faith-based organizations do not provide to the federal government. And so maybe something to look at of whether, if you're one of those faith-based groups that aren't required to have a 990, whether that is still a COG requirement. Like I said, I defer to manager on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Patrick, and then Michael.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, hearing that, it's something I could have staff look at that, because if the federal IRS is not requiring a 990 of faith-based institutions, we can have our staff look to see if that's a requirement we want to still continue. it sounds like we probably do not need to for a faith-based institution.
Okay, Michael, and then Barbara.
Thank you. Well, it's good to see you, Dr. Williams. It's obvious that you do a lot of really incredible things that the community really values. And it's true, you and I have had multiple discussions about some of the requirements and procedural sort of documentations that are needed and all that. And you've illustrated, I think, in many different aspects, some of the gaps that we have, and even VB Thrive has been responsive to that, if I recall, made some changes to accommodate your requests. And I think that's really good, and I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. And I'm also happy to hear that the requirements at COG have changed so that faith-based organizations would have access to apply through that process. And I also think that this also illustrates we really need to be looking at what resources are available through COG. It's not a lot of money relative to the causes that are available, and I think the people who serve on that board have to make some really difficult decisions, as we do here, and as the taxpayers do as well, about their household finances. And I know that they have many very qualified and meritorious requests that they receive at COG, and they have to sort through those things. And it's a challenge. And I think to the extent that we can provide some greater resources to unlock the potential that exists with organizations like the one that Dr. Williams represents, I think it would be very much to our benefit.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Sorry, one other thing. But in sorting through this is that we really have to figure out a way to provide. So this is taxpayer revenue this is taxpayer money that we're talking about. We all recognize that, and I know Dr. Williams recognizes that. So possibly, Dr. Williams, I'd be interested in your perspectives, because we also have to provide assurances to the taxpayer that these resources are going to be used. And I know I have every confidence in the world that they are in your organization, but that's not true in every instance in every organization. So if we're going to circumvent the requirements, there needs to be some additional safeguards. Perhaps it's a financial audit. And I don't know if your organization performs financial audits, Dr. Williams, but many nonprofits do. And I know there's a threshold if you receive federal grants. And I don't know if faith-based organizations are excluded from that. I just looked it up. If you receive federal grants in $750,000 or more, you're required to file a 990. So we need to find a way to provide these financial safeguards so that potential waste, fraud, and abuse doesn't occur. Because as much as it's important for us to support organizations like what Dr. Williams has brought to us, it's also vital that we ensure that safeguards exist, because not everyone is as honest, and waste, fraud, and abuse do occur. And we need to find a way to accommodate the ability of faith-based organizations and other grassroots community organizations to perform this work in an authentic manner, but also provide the safeguards. This isn't private philanthropy. It's not corporate philanthropy. This is taxpayer dollars, and it's incumbent upon us to be responsible with those dollars. And I think, and as the manager is looking at those processes, it's necessary that we include those safeguards for the taxpayer.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Barbara?
Just in the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat what Michael said very well, but of course, our money, the money that we get, that we control, we have to take from taxpayers. And so that's the difference between really being able to just hand it out. But I think there was a lot of confusion with the CARES Act money. And I think we just did something that other places didn't do, and we allowed nonprofits to utilize the CARES Act money, and the money that came from the federal government. We all have to realize that's not going to happen anymore. That was just unique to the pandemic. So what happened during the CARES Act money should not be seen as the basis for going forward. And we really need to make sure that if we are going to, quote, make available to any organization money that we have had to raise taxes to people in order to get, we've got to be extremely careful on how we give that out, and it has to be fair to everybody. And we do have a lot of other things on the agenda, so I won't say anything more.
Sabrina?
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Williams, for coming out and presenting a lot of the community work that the Center for Global Diplomacy has done, as was already stated, for some time now. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your testimonial. Oftentimes we hear about the data, we hear about the negativity, but it's good to see a face with a positive testimony. It's not easy, I know, to share that, but thank you for doing that. Thank you for being here today. In terms of what has been presented, certainly would like to say that what I see is hope. And Merit makes me think of your Hope Initiative. And oftentimes we see organizations out there they're the boots on the ground, they do the heavy lifting. And to Dr. Williams' point, oftentimes we have organizations that come in and use their resources, use their contacts, use their networking, but they never get the funding to carry on the work that they do every day, which is practical work, which needs funding. Let me ask you, Dr. Williams, what does it take to fund the program that you showed to us that feeds thousands of families in the city?
That program that we run, we amass about 15,000 hours of volunteer time every year. And a lot of those volunteers are sometimes unemployed. So when there are funding opportunities, we can build infrastructure, capacity building. See, when we say we can't look at the CARES Act as the indicator as to how we systemically give money to community organizations, understand something. When any funding dollar goes to an organization like United Way, there is such a bureaucratic dollar spent. When overnight you can raise up VB Thrive because you've got the funds to do that, I wonder if they gave those dollars to a Center for Global Diplomacy where we could just raise up an infrastructure within where we're hiring top staff, competent people. We're able now to access the equipment, the software data, the grant hub data, where we can begin to not only catalog this data, but we can report out this data as a means of being accountable. I think Councilman Bellucci brings up something. If we don't reimagine making grants even from the city, I mean, we pay taxes here, but dollars are spent everywhere based on what the city deems important. And I think the city is going to have to deem important what work grassroots organizations are doing and begin to make available to them those kinds of dollars, even coming alongside of them to ensure their success so that we can stem the tide where communities are oftentimes forgotten or they're not adequately served. So yeah, I gave a document, $150,000 would allow me to infrastructure career innovations of America. Those families that you see in lines, many of them would be pulled into the career building model where we can not only help them acquire jobs and find jobs, but we can become a transportation center to them, a resource center for plugging them into all kinds of opportunities. So, you know, when you fund a grassroots operation where they can have capacity building dollars, not just programmatic dollars, but dollars where they can hire people, where they can buy the equipment and the kinds of software that they need to, like I said, amass this data, we would be able to help our people in these communities in a phenomenal way. So, you know, sometimes it's good to look at the accountability side. But then when we know we have an interest in doing something in communities where the infrastructure is not adequately there, we've got to now begin to say, let's put infrastructure dollars somewhere so that we can build the infrastructure that's going to create the apparatus for us to do a better job in our community. That's what VB Thrive is. That's infrastructure dollars sitting in town center, reaching back into communities like Green Run, Chimney Hill, SeaTac, or Bayside. Those are the three target areas in Virginia Beach. But when you set up in town center, and then you want to utilize the grassroots groups in those localized communities, at some point we began to talk about equity and fairness and why we can't just get the dollars to do what the dollars are supposed to do in our communities. And that's what I'm hoping that City Council can somewhat look at. I would have loved to get a building or an office at Town Center, but I'm at Chimney Hill serving the people in Chimney Hill and all of the surrounding communities in a storefront, and it's working.
And so if I just wanted to ask that question, if I could have your patience a bit more, have a couple other things to say. So thank you for that dollar amount. And I know that last year you requested funding through our budget, and it was considered, but it was not provided. So this is a second chance of sorts for you to provide information, details to what you do to have that consideration for our upcoming budget. And so I also, in listening to our conversation, I want to thank Vice Mayor for bringing up COGS. Certainly, it's a program that we've discussed as a body. And the program actually, good to hear the guidelines have changed, but we also have an issue with the same organizations receiving funding time and time again. So we got to do a bit more investigation and understand how we can really diversify providing funds to organizations so we don't have the same organizations that we're giving to, so that we can give others an opportunity to gather that funding. So although COGS can be a great program, right now it's not operating at its best because there are some things we have to change to give everyone an opportunity to be a part of that process. Also thank Councilmember Berlucci for bringing up accountability and spending taxpayers' dollars. Certainly we always think about that, but I did see a lot of taxpayers in that video reaping the benefits. And oftentimes, when I talk to residents and taxpayers, they always ask what programs are available to help us in our time of need. So quite a few taxpayers there. And so, finally, I would just like to say, we certainly want to consider what you're doing, have a second look, this budget process, and consider how we can provide you with the support you need, continuing the work that you do for the citizens of Virginia Beach and taxpayers in the city of Virginia Beach. So thanks for coming out and providing your presentation. I hear presentations all the time, and I sit through lengthy presentations often. This presentation, like I said, inspires hope, inspires change, and inspires the initiative that the mayor is working on. And I'm happy to be a part of it. And I'm glad that you took the time out to provide this body with the information we need and to see the great work that is touching the lives of many people in our city.
Thank you. And I just want to say this lastly. The city calls on me to do various things. I'm calling and asking the city to hear the needs that I have. And this will be one of the best ROIs that you can ever give a grant dollar to. You will see your return on investment.
Thank you. But Chris?
Dr. Williams, thank you for coming today and thank you for asking for help. I just want to take a minute to commend you too for the courage you've shown, to share your testimony, your story, continue to do the work, and I just want to encourage you to press forward. We all do deserve second chances. Some of us get third and fourth chances. So keep pressing, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you. And I just want to thank you all for coming, and gentlemen coming for sharing your testimony. You know, the word hope popped up. It popped up in your screen with one of the folks you talked about. Council member Wooten brought it up, hope, the work. And yes, we as a, this is not a mayor thing. This is a council thing. This is a city thing about Project Hope, helping our people excel. And we have organizations like yourself that have been working, but now we're going to try to bring some cross-pollination, unity, mental health services, and other things available to you. So be assured I will be in touch with you. We're going to be talking about workforce development. We're going to be talking about mental health, and all getting, and maybe even eventually getting into 501c3s to raise money for folks like you with the private organizations. We'll be in touch this week. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Okay, moving on to the next one, Virginia Beach Aquarium Master Plan update.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, before Cynthia Spinolis gets up to start the presentation, just want to remind council that this feasibility study was funded by City Council last November 2021, actually, using the American Rescue Plan Act appropriation that the aquarium received. Remember, the goal of that feasibility study was to kind of lay out a path of what it would look like to work on some much needed repairs and a visioning for the next steps future for our aquariums. All right, so with that, Cynthia, and sorry, before you get started, Cynthia, one last thing. The goal of this presentation is to have a baseline conversation. We're not asking for a response on this now. City Council is really to prepare us as we enter into the retreat, so City Council can weigh this in a list of priorities that we have to give staff a sense of direction in terms of what projects you'd like us to work on your behalf.
Great. Welcome, and thanks for everything you do, and thanks for helping Virginia Beach be put on the map in a positive way for such a long time and for our future. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, members of City Council, City Manager. It's great to be back today to share the feasibility study and the master plan for the Virginia Aquarium's future growth and sustainability, but most importantly, for our city's future growth and sustainability. Today, I want to share with you how we're going to further your goals for the City of Virginia Beach to enhance and grow our city as a destination for tourism and attractions, enhance our hospitality product in the resort area, and provide world-class lifelong learning educational programming. But before I begin, let me introduce our board for the Aquarium Nonprofit Foundation. They're your partners, and they provide significant resources to the City of Virginia Beach for the Virginia Aquarium. I'm joined by our officers today, Sal DeBarrow, Dan Peterson, and Sherry Miles. So let me begin with a quote that I know is very familiar in all of our lives. Failing to plan becomes a plan unto itself, or merely put, failing to plan is simply planning to fail, as Dr. Ross Hammond pointed out to me last week. As many of you know, our main building in the Virginia Aquarium began construction in 1984, and we opened to the public in 1986, and then we expanded in 1995, and again in 2007. Last year, as the city manager pointed out, you appropriated monies to conduct a master plan and feasibility study for not only the replacement of this aging infrastructure, but also updating, enhancing our visitor experience. Before I introduce our consultant today for this plan, let me share a few basic facts about the aquarium. As you can see here, Currently, your city department, the Virginia Aquarium, contributes $257 million in direct and indirect economic impact to the city of Virginia Beach. This money is generated that can go towards schools, police, fire, other public amenities for the city of Virginia Beach. And here's a fact that I think you'll find very interesting as I calculated it. Since our opening in 1986, we estimate that we have had over 19 million visits. And as my mother says, hopefully it was fun, but also educational. Did you know that we're the third most visited attraction in the Commonwealth of Virginia, only behind King's Dominion and Busch Gardens? So the Virginia Aquarium addresses many of your strategic goals, and in fact, the Virginia Aquarium is a key part of the resort area strategic action plan, moving the city forward in many areas. The booklet cover here, as you can see here on the Virginia Beach Resort Area Strategic Action Plan that was adopted by City Council in June of 2020, shows a renovated and expanded main building at the Virginia Aquarium by the year 2030. These extensive public planning sessions with the general public in 2019 resulted in the citizens embracing the concepts of a refreshed and expanded aquarium. In addition, as part of these planning sessions and provided in the final document that was incorporated into the plan, additional parking for the oceanfront at the Virginia Aquarium, and also providing a gateway for our visitors as they approach the resort area. And as you'll see in a few moments, we address all three areas: an expanded and refreshed aquarium, additional parking for the resort area, and this beautiful gateway. As I mentioned in the first few slides, we're approaching 40 years old. The main building, which includes three of our most iconic exhibits, the seal tank, the shark tank, and our turtle tank, all have significant challenges due to their age. And if you've taken a behind-the-scenes tour with me, as I know many of you have, you'll know my famous quote: saltwater, concrete, and steel don't work well together long-term. And if you've spent any time at the aquarium this summer, you'll know that our seal tank and our Ray Touch Pool tank were closed as we attempted to patch and repair these structural problems. We know that these tanks and many of our other tanks need complete replacements. Nothing lasts forever. And if you have salt water, it really does not last forever. I'd like to quote my facilities vice president. He says, "Cynthia, no car runs forever, or at least one that you want to drive." So, unlike other museums that don't have that live animal collection, we can't just drain those tanks to make the repairs or replacements. We need a space for these animals. We need a space to move these animals while we create and refresh their existing habitats. And that's why we need to renovate the existing habitats, but create an expanded aquarium. Additionally, you might say, well, just move these animals to another institution while you drain the tanks and renovate that. Not only would that be extremely costly, but in some cases, we wouldn't be able to repopulate these animal areas. Not to mention, do you really want to close for 3 years under construction and lose the $257 million of economic impact? So let's plan. But let's make an incredible plan. So we began planning in 2018, and we started talking about this conundrum. What do we do to renovate and replace and refresh? And in 2020, the city took the first steps, and we signed a 100-year lease across the street with Camp Pendleton for the overflow parking lot. This provides that needed area for us to do an expansion. We also began to master plan, and we didn't want to just react to our infrastructure needs. We wanted to plan for the city's long-term viability and for our future. So today, I'm excited to share our progress and discuss our next steps. As your partner, the Aquarium Foundation, thanks to the City of Virginia Beach's monies from the CARES Act, hired Roto Group and Canopy Strategic Partners to help us understand potential next steps, costs associated with a renovation and expansion, and the possibilities. Let me introduce one of our consultants, Julie Hartunian from Roto, and she will share with you what we developed and collected for your review.
Welcome.
Thanks. Good afternoon, City Council members. Thank you for having me. As Cynthia mentioned, my name is Julie Hartunian. I'm Design Director at Roto. We are an exhibit design firm based in Columbus, Ohio. I'm actually based in the Boston area, without the accent. I've been doing exhibit design for the past 15 years, primarily in live animal exhibits like aquariums, and work for many world-class institutions that are accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, like Virginia Aquarium is. As Cynthia mentioned, we worked on the master plan in 2018 from that picture you saw earlier, but I'm excited to share with you the refresh that we did of this master planning process, which is what you see on these screens here. This is not only looking at the existing spaces and kind of refreshing and reimagining them, but also thinking about how the expanded space can bring in new species and be an attraction to make a world-class destination. Cynthia mentioned we have a parking garage structure that's part of the first phase of the project. You'll see that in the lower right-hand corner. And there's a pedestrian bridge that crosses over that main roadway there. That pedestrian bridge is going to become a gateway to the resort community. It'll bring visitors in from the top level of the garage to the second level of the aquarium space, and I can get into some of the details on that with you. The parking garage does a few things. It provides parking for the resort community, the resort area. It also is taking some of the displaced parking from the expansion and moving that parking to the parking garage. And of course is, bringing, I think it's 600 spaces to 800 spaces for 800 parking spaces for the facility. So this is the overall site plan. What you don't see here is the Darden Marine Animal Conservation Center, and this is where the aquarium's aquatic collection has quarantines all their animals and has their stranded sea turtles, and also takes care of their marine mammals at this location. This is not open to the public, but we have opportunities within the exhibits to kind of feature and talk about those conservation goals. So this is a bubble diagram showing how you'll enter the aquarium on level 2 from the parking garage. So that pedestrian bridge, that gateway, will bring people across safely over the roadway, and then you can circulate down through an elevator or a staircase, or you can continue straight into the main building of the aquarium through ticketing and also start to experience the exhibits. There'll be a changing exhibit gallery on this level, a conservation gallery, and it'll open up to a large lobby area. The second plan is, again, another bubble diagram. It's really just showing the zones and the relationships between the areas. And this is really focusing on how the lobby is sort of transformed. Rather than having a linear circulation like the aquarium currently has, it'll take the lobby and kind of turn it into a central meeting point. It'll also make the lobby an event space. That is kind of, think of a flower. It's the center of the flower, and then you've got these petals around it that are the gallery spaces for people to choose which direction they want to go in. The lobby will also offer opportunity to, of course, go to the retail space or the cafe, and there'll be some outdoor seating as well. The phasing, as Cynthia mentioned, is very important to this plan. Phase 1 is the parking structure and that gateway. Phase 2, the goal is to build phase 2 so that we have a home for the animals to be moved into, while phase 3 and 4 are the areas of the existing aquarium that would be refreshed. So as you look at this slide, this is really an infographic kind of showing how things are, how we have new exhibits. There's going to be a lot more classroom space. There's certainly going to be a lot more event space. There'll be multiple locations to hold events, whether that's in that lobby area or at a particular gallery. I believe that the total number of gallons we're up to is like 650,000 gallons. So that's a very large aquarium in the whole scheme of things. The building overview here is kind of like taking the roof off and looking at all the different gallery spaces. Again, that central lobby space is in the middle, and that offers the opportunities to go to each of those galleries, and I'll explain a little bit more about what those galleries include. The two colors that you see here are showing the comparison between the renovation space and the new construction space. So this is on level 2, and again, and then level 1. So there's a fair amount of new construction, which is certainly important, but as Cynthia mentioned, the existing space is in dire need of renovation, and the deferred maintenance, I think, is starting to catch up with everyone. The parking garage will have the gateway bridge. We're thinking of this bridge as not necessarily being just a pathway, a sidewalk that is, keeping people safe as they cross. We want it to be a little bit more of an experience. So you can see the reference photos that we're including here are thinking about how we might provide a little bit of shelter, or we might include planting. So this is still yet to be designed, but we want it to be a feature unto itself. That entry and lobby space that I described is going to have the large tank that will hold the animal that's on the sea turtle that's on the Virginia Aquarium logo. This will be a great space for events. It'll be the first exhibit that visitors will see as they cross over the bridge and go through ticketing. This will also have a conservation gallery. The conservation gallery will focus on the important work that Virginia Aquarium is doing in the off-site at the Darden Center, and also within their research and within the AZA community. That photo there on the right is an example of how that tank might appear. We're thinking of a multi-story tank with sea turtles in it, and that the vertical circulation will be beside it. There's an opportunity here, of course, to take the sea turtle stranding work that Virginia Aquarium does and just really focus on it and showcase it. And so there might be interactives, like that second photo shows, of how children can act like a veterinarian and sort of simulate that work. Additionally, the shark and ray habitat will give an opportunity for visitors to experience sharks and rays in different perspectives. So you might see the animals in front of you, you might see them swimming overhead. There might be the opportunity to actually feed the sharks. So all of these elements are being considered that are going to elevate Virginia Aquarium to that next level. The Atlantic Gallery will have a new species, African penguins, and penguins are very exciting for marketing and promotion. People love watching penguins, both above water. They spend a fair amount of time above water, but they're really awesome to see swim underwater. And there'll be experiences like that top photo where there's a pop-up where visitors can actually crawl inside and sort of be inside the exhibit, and that'll also be a photo opportunity as well. The Pacific Gallery, this is again a refresh of the existing gallery, maintaining some of the species that they have there, but also rerouting circulation and thinking about how this particular gallery can focus primarily on the Pacific species. The local gallery, again, this is an existing gallery with a refresh. And the pinniped habitat, we're really excited about this one. The pinnipeds are seals and sea lions. Again, another really dynamic species. There'll be opportunities for the visitors to see the animals underwater, above water. There'll be even a tunnel, we're planning a tunnel, which the animals can swim above you or below you. And again, opportunities for performances and shows and presentations. The immersive media gallery is the old IMAX theater. And so this IMAX theater, which is no longer in use, would get a refresh, would have interactive exhibits, and again, try to be a media presentation. So here's an example of how that might, how visitors might experience that. So the aquarium isn't only about live animals. We want to have some hands-on experience as well. The aquarium, the live critters are usually the stars of the show, but not everyone is necessarily only wants to see animals. We want to get people active. So there's opportunities to do that with those hands-on exhibits. And the Young Learners Gallery is another small area that would provide an area for kids to go and get a little energy out that's specifically for preschool age. I mentioned event space a few times. There's plenty of opportunities between the lobby and some of the large tank windows for events to occur. So it might be saying your vows in front of the shark tank. There'll be opportunities indoor and outdoor for events of various sizes. And of course, classroom and wet labs for educational components, state-of-the-art equipment and spaces to bring school groups in. So one of the important things the aquarium will need an upgrade on is the life support system. The plan is to replace the storage tanks that are below ground currently and relocate them. So we would need to create a new state-of-the-art building to supply or to support all of the tanks, whether they're the existing tanks or the new tanks. So here we are with the estimated capital costs. These are in today's dollars. Again, we're looking at the phasing of we're looking at 4 phases here, and the range that we're showing here is a range. We're not sure what the market's going to do, and we're frankly beginning to design these elements. So I think the range is, depending on how the design direction goes, and I think also when we look at construction, especially the existing building, when we look at the construction of the existing building, what discoveries we might find. And lastly, the timeline. We're looking at, of course, we mentioned phase 1 being the parking garage and the pedestrian bridge. And the final phase, which would be completed in 2033, would be, or phase 4 would be 2023. So kind of incrementally looking at the way, as we said, you shuffle the animals in order to not lose the collection and make sure that you're maintaining revenue while the aquarium stays open. Hand it back to Cynthia.
Great, thanks, Julie. You can tell we're really excited. So our other consultant, Canopy Strategic Partners, David Walsh, who's president and CEO out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, last night, as he was getting ready to board his airplane, he was unwell, and he sends his regrets today that he cannot join you. He has 2 slides that he was kind enough to email me some bullet points, so I will cover David Walsh's portion. So Canopy Strategic Partners, they work with zoos and aquariums all over the world. They've worked with over 150 other accredited zoos and aquariums in doing planning, feasibility studies, and exactly what we did here today. So here's a quote from David. What Roto has just shown you today rivals some of the best aquariums, positioning you, Virginia Beach, as a top aquarium between New York and Atlanta. So Canopy's role was to test the financial feasibility of the project. So they have this quote. They said, of course, my sports fans will like this. If you build it, will they actually come? And if they do come, can you operate it in a financially sustainable way? And this is the answer from Canopy. The answer is a resounding yes. The improvements outlined, which touch every part of the main building in the aquarium, will increase your visitation and bring more people to the city of Virginia Beach. So, of course, attendance is the lifeblood in any cultural attraction. And we know, as you can see from this slide, we expect our attendance to grow dramatically. In addition to our attendance growing, we expect our gross revenues to increase dramatically. You'll see here that we expect our gross revenues in direct revenues to increase to $35 million, and we expect conservatively to increase our visitation by about 330,000 people. What does that mean to you? That means direct admissions tax. That means doubling your admissions tax. And it means that we're going to give more money back to the general fund for more things for the city to do, like schools and roads. So the revenues will grow, as you can see, from $18 million to $35 million if we build it. Of course, as we mentioned in the earlier slides, what happens if you don't do this? We know not only will we not see these numbers, but we'll continue to decline and we'll lose attendance and potentially even close. And of course, as we know, our guests' expectations change rapidly. I like to say Busch Gardens doesn't build a new roller coaster every 5 years because they want to. They build it because they have to. Guests' expectations continue to grow. So we have the ideal strategy to make this happen and maximize our visitation. So the key is to not only sustain, but to enhance in a very strategic way. According to Canopy's research, the cost of doing nothing is significant. If we don't do anything, we will spend $80 to $100 million just replacing these exhibits alone, and we'll probably lose our animal collection. So let's dream big. Canopy mentioned that if you read in the news, Syracuse, New York, they're building a brand new aquarium. They don't have an aquarium. They would kill to have an aquarium. They said that cities like in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Texas, to name just a few, are looking to build aquariums. They know that these drive tourists and make communities better. So this is a quote from Canopy. "You already have a first-class facility. Let's make it world-class." And I'll have David's final statement before I close. David's final statement is, to close, our task was to answer the question for the aquarium and for the city. Is this project feasible? And again, the answer is a definitive yes. It's a project that will bring more people into Virginia Beach with a larger geographic reach beyond Hampton Roads and further enhance our economic and our conservation initiatives. So that was David. I want you all to know I did that. He called this, hey, I can't come. So, all right, so let me close with my last slide. We still have work to do. So as you can see here, we need to update that economic impact study. We know currently we generate $257 million a year in economic impact in direct and indirect. But what will it be when we do this great new expansion? So we need to update that. Secondly, as you know, all of our city projects, I mentioned 1986, I mentioned 1995, 2007, and our South Building. Our partner, the Aquarium Foundation, participates with you, the city, and all of those projects. So right now, we've hired the Curtis Group to do a feasibility study on fundraising. What is the fundraising capacity? And finally, today, I ask for your consideration in the upcoming capital improvements budget to appropriate $3.7 million in garage and gateway bridge design to start this long-term project rolling. So I'll end with, if you're a Sports Center fan like I am, and you know Stuart Scott, this is a quote from Stuart Scott. "Don't downgrade your dream just to fit your reality. Upgrade your conviction to match your destiny." So thank you. So Julie and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Any questions? Yeah, Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Cynthia, for that great presentation and all the work that you've been doing on that. And the tour that you kindly gave me about a month ago. You mentioned something about charging for the garage, for parking in the garage, and that would help offset that cost. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes. Well, so 2 years ago, we did a pilot project as part of our budget proposal, and we began to charge for surface parking. Those monies that we generate for parking currently for surface and in the proposed garage would be generated that go back into the operations of the aquarium. So we get that money back through our budget process, so it does support the aquarium.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Amelia?
Yes, I enjoyed visiting and seeing all that you had, and also having the opportunity to see the 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds talking about everything in the volcano. So this is an important project. What I wanted to let you reiterate is the whiffing factor with having this first phase to do with the parking for the city and for the aquarium.
Oh, sure. So, of course, as we mentioned, this not only helps the aquarium because we're going to displace parking when we do our expansion. We need to have somewhere for those cars to park. So this garage provides an opportunity for that parking to move across the street. But more importantly, in your resort area strategic action plan that you adopted in June of 2020, this provides additional capacity for parking at the ocean front. So that piece. And then the Gateway Bridge, which I'm really excited about because that provides a welcome to the resort area. So we need it to cross General Booth Boulevard. That's a busy intersection, and we're now a 2-story building. So as you enter on the 2nd story, you need a way to traverse General Booth Boulevard. But let's make it really spectacular and make it welcoming and make it one of these gateways. That resort area master plan calls for various gateways as you approach the resort area. Let's make that General Booth Boulevard with this bridge a true gateway. So I think it accomplishes those 3 things with the parking garage.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anybody else? Yes, Josh?
Cynthia, I just want to say thank you very much for an enjoyable tour. Behind the scenes, I've never been that close to a shark without glass between it and me. And I wanted to acknowledge the aquarium as being one of the many reasons that our city is a wonderful year-round destination for visitors, but it's also a wonderful amenity for our residents, and in particular our families. I've got 3 young girls, and every time we take them there, seeing the world through the eyes of a child is you see something, you experience something new each time for the first time, and even as an adult, when you're there, you kind of feel that as well. I want to commend you for how you handled the pandemic. That gave us all something to do while we were otherwise cooped up in our homes. And I want to quickly ask you whether or not, as part of the funding analysis, whether you're looking at other sources of funding besides city funding, whether state funding is being considered, other kind of buckets of resources to tap into.
I'll start first. So the first thing I think Cynthia's probably going to go more detail on is that one of the first things that we're doing is also doing a review on the fundraising capability of Hampton Roads. Before we touch or tap any state funding, council needs to let us know that this is a priority. So we wouldn't go and talk to any state agencies or state departments until council gives us the authorization to say this is something that they want us to prioritize in terms of moving forward and working on as well. So we haven't got that far because we don't want to get in front of the council. Cynthia, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
That was perfect.
Hey, anybody else? Yeah, Sabrina?
So, good afternoon, Cynthia. So every time I go and visit Virginia Aquarium, I'm reminded of the educational piece. Could you elaborate more on that?
Sure,
please?
absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because we talk a lot about that economic impact. But we're a cultural institution as well as an educational institution. So non-pandemic times, before pandemic, we had about 30,000 school children that come through our facility every year. We're addressing SOLs, the Virginia SOLs. In addition, we're also out into the school systems. So education, of course, is a priority. We know that our visitors, as the council member here mentioned in his 3 girls, we know visitors, they don't get up in the morning and go, oh, I want to go get educated. They get up in the morning and they go, oh, I want to go have fun. But they also think, gosh, I want to have fun, but isn't this great that we're also receiving, my kids are having an educational experience as well. So we provide both of those pieces in terms of education. Not to mention all of the educational programming that we do for all ages. Our boat tours, we have about 100,000 people enjoy whale watching in the winter, dolphin watching in the summer. We do Sharks After Dark for people that don't want to come with their kids. We do a whole host of educational programming for all ages. And again, it's that educational amenity for lifelong learning, which I know is one of City Council's goals.
I want to say real quick, kudos to the program, because I remember seeing it was like a display teaching children about the watershed, so that they are knowledgeable about it as they come up and become adults. And then I also remember the piece where you were able to show school students if they wanted to be a veterinarian, how they could, kind of look at the exhibit, become a part of that, and just give them ideas about going about that. So I thought that was magnificent. Again, kudos to what you and your staff do, and congratulations on the 2023 year upcoming. I know there'll be great things that you'll continue to do.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Let me just say, in summary, what a valuable asset you are. It's a magnificent facility. Costs a lot of money to run. It's labor intensive. Takes a lot of equipment updating, a lot of expansion and things. And the thing is, the tangible benefit that you bring to the city of Virginia Beach is a long-term tangible, amenity to our city, which really helps define us as a city. But I'll tell you what, I think that you're looked upon favorably, and if there's a way, be assured that Mr. Dehaney and company always find a way. So that's a good thing. Okay, nothing like being put on the spot, right, Patrick?
You tell me to go there, Mayor, we go there.
Well, our motto, get to yes, okay? Thank you.
And if anyone wants to get up close to a shark or a seal, please let me know. Happy to do behind the scenes tours of the main building so you can see what it takes to run that, as well as our Darden Marine Animal Conservation Center so you can see those stranded animals, and of course our new South building, which is spectacular, as Councilmember Wooten pointed out, a lot of those educational opportunities. So anytime you would like one of those, please feel free to reach out and we will certainly make sure that you get one of those great tours.
Hey, great. I've been on a few of them.
Yes, you have. Yes, sir. We enjoyed all
right,
of them.
Thanks a bunch. Most appreciated.
Thank you.
Take care. Good to see you.
See you, Mayor.
All right, next up on the resort area mobility plan.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at the request of Councilmember Remick, we're bringing this forward for a presentation to City Council. Kathy, if I remember correctly, this is coming in the next voting meeting, or?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the actual plan is coming to council the next voting meeting for council to consider and for approval if council so desires.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, Mr. City Manager. Today, we are here to present the final Resort Area Mobility Plan, or RAMP. Completing a mobility plan for the resort was one of the top priorities for the Resort Area Strategic Action Plan, or RASAP, which was adopted by City Council in June of 2020. The RAMP is a culmination of 2 years of steering committee, monthly meetings, public engagement, and of course, working closely with our colleagues across many of our city departments. The purpose of this plan is to move people around the resort in an efficient way and to create a more pedestrian-friendly environment. We believe the recommendations in this plan will help us get there. With great success, we've already piloted some of these recommendations. One in particular, which you may have heard of, is Freebie, which is offering free point-to-point rides within the boundary of the resort. So before I turn this over to Kyle Williams with Kimley Horn, special thanks to Kyle and his staff with Kimley Horn over the last 2 years. Special thanks to city staff, of course, and specifically Debbie Zibna on our staff, who helped coordinate this whole process. And then finally, thanks to our resort stakeholders, the members of the Resort Advisory Commission and the Ramp Steering Committee, and specifically Chuck Caton, who is here with us today. And Chuck spent the last 2 years helping us by chairing the resort Ramp Steering Committee. So thank you, Chuck, and thank you for being here today. And I'll turn it over to Kyle.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of council. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for your service and dedication and leadership to the city. I'm a transportation planner with Kimley Horn out of our Virginia Beach office. Spent the better part of 17 years of my career. Actually, the first project I worked on was some parking garage renovation work down in the resort area. So it's home to me. It's important to me, and I'm glad to be able to have some influence on transportation going forward. Admittedly, I'm a little nervous at the moment after now hearing that we're going to have penguins at the aquarium, that we've done enough to get people to the aquarium in this plan. So had I known this a few months ago, we might have changed some things a little bit. Just getting there. Let's see. So I'm going to cover 2 years worth of information in about 15 minutes if I can. There's a lot that has gone into this, many hours. I echo Kathy's thank you to the staff involved, the community involved, stakeholders involved. It's truly a community-driven plan, which is really important as we develop these. So I'm going to cover the overview just in general, talk about some of the things that influenced the decisions, not just what we heard, but what we saw and what we measured. Cover some just high-level recommendations, and then be glad to open the floor for any questions. So the mobility plan was one of the action items that came out of the Resort Area Strategic Action Plan, which was also referenced in the previous presentation. We started this process right in the middle, at the very beginning of the pandemic, August of 2020. It changed really the way that we had thought we were going to go about doing this. And we got creative, which I'll share some of those examples here in a minute. So this, again, is a carryover or a priority that came out of that RACEP plan. Mobility, just in general, and what we're trying to do here is shift and balance our network and our system away from moving the vehicle per se and moving safely people and goods. And that's not to say we're turning our back to vehicles. They will continue to be one of the more important aspects of our transportation system, but how do we balance it and safely balance it to move people in a more efficient manner? So some of the inputs that we looked that influenced the recommendations here. So I've got a map on the screen of the study area. This is consistent with the Resort Area Strategic Action Plan. You'll see some of the key areas and destinations on there. You'll see some of the districts that were created as part of the RACEP with Central Beach and the Vibe District and Alaskan Gateway and things that have been here for many years. But again, looking at how we can connect these better, that it doesn't require somebody to get in their vehicle and drive to them if they're already here. The community engagement, again, this was a really important aspect that this was a community-driven plan. We had over 3,000 people contribute to this. We had over 20 stakeholder discussions, one-on-ones with the Atlantic Avenue Association, Old Beach Civic League, a lot of those individual groups, just to make sure we had broad representation in what we're pulling together, the community could support. We had our advisory committee. Sometimes we met with them twice a month to keep things moving. It started as the Transportation Pedestrian Parking Subcommittee of the RAC. And then we added some, just making sure we had enough representation from all the businesses in the area. we did 4 public surveys, one being a broader survey, but we sent our interns down one summer and they got to spend a week riding the trolleys and interacting with our guests and how they use it, and just helping influence some of the decisions as we look at as transit as a component of it. And then we had one public information session that covered the high level kind of aspects of the plan and gathered some input there as well. This was one of the first questions that we asked our advisory committee at the very beginning of this. And this was kind of a snapshot of what we heard in that and what was your expectation for the mobility plan. So it was things like cohesive and connected, simplifying, ease of use, safety and atmosphere was a big thing, streetscape sense of place. And these are all things, and strategy for parking, and all things that we have accomplished throughout this entire process. So it was cool to reflect back at the very beginning of what we heard and what came out of it. There's been many plans before us. As recent as the 2021 Cities Active Transportation Plan that sets the overall plan for active transportation with the city. We got to use a lot of the information from that and then define and create an actual network that uses those goals that were set as part of that. Going all the way back to the Oceanfront Transportation Management Plan back in 2000, there are still relevant recommendations, the gateway features being one of those that you heard about a second ago that were in that plan that we still want to carry forward because of the importance of beginning to shift the perspective of the driver, that you're now entering into an area where we need you to drive safely, we need you to slow down, we need you to enjoy your time here. So a lot of that stuff came forward in those past plans and influencing some of the recommendations here. For our data collection, it's important to take what we hear from the community and then also overlay it with actual measurable things, just to make sure there's a perception and then there's a reality, and trying to strike the balance of that. I mentioned creativity at the beginning of this because as a transportation engineer, we hit the pause button on a lot of the data collection just because people weren't traveling as much during 2020, and we definitely had a different resort season that year. Anytime you hit accept on terms and conditions on cell phone apps, and particular ones, we actually have access to some of that information now. So we're able to leverage traveler patterns throughout the resort area of where people are coming from, where they're going, distance of trip, and we were able to equate it back to 2019 when we had a more realistic or reasonable travel pattern. So there's some really interesting information that came out of that to help influence it. As we were preparing the plan, we were able to leverage 2021 when we got a lot of activity and everything was starting to open back up. One of the data pieces that just, you get down there, you see a lot of people, but once you start counting it, it was really eye-opening. So we did a pedestrian count on Atlantic Avenue on a Saturday from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. We counted over 12,000 people on the sidewalk of Atlantic Avenue during that time frame and using the crosswalks and around there. And it's just, you put that into perspective, we have a lot of people in that 8-hour window on that one particular day that we counted. So just reassured us what we were trying to do with the balance and the safety of the pedestrians definitely being at the forefront of what we're looking at with this plan. So additional data in terms of parking, the quick build project that we did on Atlantic Avenue with the 3-block segment. I've got a great photo of Councilman riding his bike through that segment. So if anybody likes to see that, I'll certainly share that with you all. But it
There's
was
a magic Kodak moment.
yeah, exactly. Big smile on his face too. So he was enjoying it. But it was just, it gave the community a snapshot of what it could be. And I think that was really important, as it takes time to build a lot of things. And we were able to do something that quickly and gather a lot of feedback. Yeah, we want more outdoor dining space. We want more color. We want more plantings. And just that investment there told us a lot of some of the next steps coming out of this plan, which was really, really important. So the recommendations they're organized. Some of them are what we call policy or strategy related. They're not all policy, so we call them strategies, but there are non-fiscal related things in some of these. They are kind of programming, planning type ideas geared towards multimodal transportation, so vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians, and transit, And then there are also 5 categories of our parking strategies that are focused on parking. The numbers there on the bottom right of each of those blocks there. So we've got 21 multimodal strategies that fit within those 5 categories. So how we coordinate with our stakeholders, prioritizing safety and how we're going to do that, recognizing that the resort area has different needs from other areas of our city just based on the users, some of the seasonality aspect of it and how we manage it, into flipping over to the parking strategies, for example, like how we can more effectively balance the system through controlling how people park through pricing. How we manage Atlantic Avenue, just considering that street has to do so many things for so many people. We've got to find a way to make that all fit together as best we can so there's a benefit for everyone. Somewhat tying into those strategies, we took a very in-depth look at potential projects that were coming out of this. So we had four overall network plans that set the framework for how our transit's going to look, where we want to install bike lanes, where we're going to be widening sidewalks and improving crosswalks, and carrying those broader network plans over into 7 corridor-specific improvements. So Atlantic Avenue, Pacific Avenue, Norfolk Avenue, 21st Street, 22nd Street. There are implementable solutions in there that, again, gives a framework to begin to program out future projects. And then there are 15 intersection-specific recommendations that somewhat rose to the top through the coordination process, the engagement of where we thought we needed to focus some additional attention on. Some of them are things as simple as striping and, LED flashing signs that bring more attention to the pedestrian, to larger, moving curbs and a little bit more costly projects. So there are things in there that are definitely what I'd call kind of low-hanging fruit, easy to implement type things, which is great. I don't intend for everybody to be able to read this. This was just intended to be for your packet. And just some of the highlights that came out of this. So over 15 new miles of sidewalk throughout the area, safer crossings, over 8 miles of new on and off street bicycle facilities. So some of the off street paths like we have down there today, but trying to not disrupt and take a lot of property from folks. We're trying to avoid widening. I'll show an example of that here in a second. Looking at transit, Kathy referenced the micro transit, the freebie service. I've got a slide here in a second, but just leveraging new technologies and new ways how transit is provided besides the traditional fixed route type vehicles. Shared mobility, scooters came up during this, other types of mobility devices. The e-bikes weren't a thing when we started this project, then all of a sudden everybody's riding e-bikes. And so there's some resiliency in how we've created this network to plan for some of those unforeseeable things that are going to continue to be introduced as things evolve. The vehicle network, there are new strategies for traffic calming and how we handle vehicle speeds that supplement a lot of the stuff things that traffic engineering and public works are already doing. It just gives them additional tools to be able to leverage as we look at new projects, retrofitting existing streets, things like that. And then, of course, the parking network. The big thing with the parking network, and one of the things that happened ongoing, is the development of the VB Go app, which allows users to locate and pay through text message parking on demand on your phone as they enter the resort area. So bringing in those types of things that can help supplement ease of use, those things we heard at the very beginning of the project are all things that are layered in within our strategies and our recommendations. So a couple of the future projects just to draw your attention to. I won't go into the details of the map there, but one of the key aspects of what we were trying to do with the bicycle network was to create connections within our districts away from Atlantic Avenue and the boardwalk. A lot of people use those roads today, but there's not the emphasis placed on where the bicyclist should be. So it creates some safety issues. It creates some level of stress issues, young kids, for example. So we prioritize trying to leverage existing space, not impact the community. And I'll show an example of this here in a second. So this is Mediterranean Avenue between Norfolk Avenue and Winston-Salem, so kind of towards the marina area. This is a snapshot looking towards the marina. It's in the background there. And through signs and striping, what you can do is what's called a bicycle boulevard. And it just places emphasis that the cyclist has access to the street. There is wayfinding that is also recommended as part of this. So there is, 5-minute bike ride to get to Central Beach, like destination type things that will encourage folks to get out, find their way around, and give them a sense of place. But again, no right-of-way impact. It's signs, it's pavement markings. It's relatively easy to implement, but it significantly enhances the safety of all street users. On the vehicle network side, so looking at 21st and 22nd Street, we talked a moment ago about the importance of the sense of arrival and the gateway features. This is one that continues to come up and needs to be at the forefront, because what we found in that cellular data we looked at, we've got over 75% of our visitors, even residents, enter the resort area through 21st Street. And think about where some of those people are coming from. They're on the interstate for 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours of nonstop as fast as you want to drive. And then all of a sudden you abruptly get to the end of Interstate 264, still a lot of pavement through there, but now you're in a neighborhood and then you're in a resort area, and creating the sense of arrival that I'm no longer, my vehicle is becoming second and just beginning to look out for the other roadway users. So existing snapshot, standing here at Cypress Avenue Resort is in the background there, but analyzing what the street could be, if you think about as you come in, the interstate at Bird Neck, it narrows down and then it widens back up, and then we narrow it back down as we get closer to the resort area. So trying to create a consistent section through there of 3 lanes where people aren't having to, oh, this lane now becomes a right turn lane, let me get over, but creating some consistency. Taking where you don't need that additional lane, creating some vertical elements, again, just some visual cues to the driver that the street, looks more residential than it did, with it being a wide area of asphalt. And again, we need to analyze this. Obviously, this is a termination of the interstate, so we got to make sure it works from a traffic flow standpoint, but conceptually, the ideas are absolutely there. Microtransit, the freebie service. So this was absolutely fascinating. And just the amount of ridership that came out of this in its first year as a pilot. They are a Florida-based company, and we far exceeded any of their routes in their first year in terms of a ridership, in terms of ridership numbers over the first 3 months. It continues to be used regularly. And one of the things that I didn't anticipate, which has been just a fantastic outcome of this, is the benefit that the SeaTac community has gained from this. So you'll see on the left-hand side, the heat maps of the red areas are where our drop off and pickup locations are. And just what it's done to, as opposed to having a fixed route service that only runs on a certain route and then you're required to walk, amount of distance. You hail this like you would an Uber or a Lyft, and it's door to door and take you to where you want to go within that resort area. So we had nearly 10,000 riders per month over July, August, September. I believe the October, November numbers were still in the 8,000 range, which is pretty indicative that the residents are benefiting from this as well, besides just our tourists that are coming in here. So I mean, this is an opportunity of how we connect the aquarium, right? So the visitor or whomever don't have to get in their car, drive down there. They get dropped off, they get picked up. But just trying to diversify the options and the access for folks to move around without having to park their vehicle once, and then they have full access to all the great offerings we have in the resort area. Atlantic Avenue was certainly a topic of conversation throughout this project. We were told, I was told at the beginning of this, we will never build consensus on what Atlantic Avenue should look like. And we built consensus on Atlantic Avenue, which was a really exciting outcome. And what we're working forward to, or working now towards in the design phase, and actually putting these plans onto paper and getting it built, which is exciting. Again, a lot of conversation. This street does everything. I mean, you've got dumpsters that get rolled out on Tuesdays and Fridays. You've got linen service at the hotels. You've got deliveries for all of our businesses. It's a trolley lane. It's 12,000 people in an 8-hour period. So it does a lot as a street. But it's, it's the front porch of our area, and it's where everybody is. And so the emphasis on creating sense of place for our pedestrians, creating sense of place for bicyclists, improving access to those businesses, and just increasing or improving the experience overall. What came out of this after a lot of conversations is looking or developing Atlantic Avenue in 3 different segments, 25th to 40th Street, where it's a little bit narrower of a footprint with 3 lanes through there. 5th Street or 17th Street to 25th Street, kind of through that entertainment core, and really focusing on enhancing that western curb where we've got a lot of, just people and street entertainers and things like that. And then doing something a little bit creative from 5th to 17th Street where I'll show, let me skip to this. There we go. This gives you a visual. So this is 5th Street to 17th Street. And in each of these, what we've looked at doing is removing one of the trolley lanes, mixing the trolley within the traffic. And then in this section, from 5th to 17th, taking that extra space that we gain and serpentining the road back and forth. So we're creating pockets for streetscape, pockets for widened sidewalk, pockets for amenities. And it's just going to create a curvilinear, just a different kind of flowing approach to the roadway, create some just a unique pattern and aspect. There's traffic calming associated with this as the vehicle has to kind of meander back and forth. And it's just going to create a very interesting street besides the very just linear nature that it is today. This puts you in the street level of just a conceptual rendering. The colors, the trees, the types of lights, all of that stuff is being vetted now in terms of what the street is actually going to look like. But this just gives you an idea of, just an example of what it could be in terms of kind of repurposing some of the space, paver enhancements, things like that for the sidewalk, and just improving the look and feel of that street. A lot of priorities here. As I mentioned, there are some priorities that can begin almost immediately with really no fiscal input needed. And, we've got a lot of our committees down in the resort area. One of the things I've challenged with is like creating educational campaigns for our folks, like how to safely cross the street, like little things like that people I think take for granted, of getting information out of how we want you to use our resort area. Information for our guests coming into our hotels, like it's a 5-minute walk to get to Central Beach and it gives you access to this. And just educating the various aspects of mobility are things that can be created without a major fiscal component to it. There are other projects in here that will require some capital to do. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are some priorities out of this that are striping and signage and can be done with a lot less impact than major corridor projects. But these are the priority actions that we had identified that, again, rose through the surface through conversation. A lot of people want a lot of things, so it was trying to narrow that list down a little bit to begin to give us a blueprint and a framework to work from. I believe that is my last slide. Thank you for several minutes of your time. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'll answer any questions if you have them.
No, that was a great presentation, and how much we love having Kimberly Horn right here in Virginia Beach. So that's
thank you.
Good stuff. Any other questions at this point? Okay, Worth and then Barbara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Kimberly Horn, Kyle, for your presentation, and Chuck Caton for your stewardship. A lot of folks have put a lot of time and energy and their stakeholders into this plan. To me, it upgrades the resort to where it should be here in the 21st century, not only in parking and pedestrian access, but in streetscape, as he just went through. Parking is always an issue at the oceanfront. It addresses that. The freebie is a great idea and concept. I think the ridership is almost 50% citizens versus tourists. The sense of arrival, you're going to hear me talk about that over the next 4 years, because I think we need to upgrade our sense of arrival. This starts to address that as you approach the oceanfront. To a $2.1 billion operation, the resort is, so it's a big part of Virginia Beach. So I think we really take a look at this plan. I think it does a great job, and we would adopt it hopefully next Tuesday as a part of the comprehensive plan.
Okay, great. Barbara?
Do we have a copy of this presentation,
We should.
slides and so forth?
We'll ensure you do.
Okay, Michael?
Thank you. I have a great presentation. Thank you very much for that. My question is actually directed for the manager. As part of the comprehensive plan, can you refresh my memory? I can understand and absolutely value the need for this plan for the resort and the unique transportation challenges and opportunities that exist there. But I'm wondering if you have anything similar or that addresses that type, this type of transportation plan for other parts of the city as part of the comprehensive plan.
Carrie? All right, good.
Yeah. And maybe this is an opportunity to take another look at how we can, and again, I don't want to be clear, I want to make sure I'm exceedingly clear. I understand the need for this very specialized look at the resort, but I also think that we need to be really thinking about connectivity, traffic, pedestrians, bikeways, trails in every area of the city, and in certain areas in particular.
So Councilmember, thank you for the question. In short, yes, and let me dive into specifically what that means, and also let me preface this comment by saying we're of course in the process or on the front end of updating your comprehensive plan right now. That is something that we owe you in the present. But yes, sir, if you go back to the very beginning of 20 years ago when we were developing your SGA plans and we laid out SGA, we laid out the the 8 SGAs, the majority of which ran down Virginia Beach Boulevard and the then expected light rail corridor. Yes, sir. Multimodal transportation was an overarching thought throughout the entire plan. Fast forward to today, there's still some of that in play in the Pembroke SGA, specifically where we've seen density come on, as was originally expected in that plan, and then also, of course, at the resort, which we're talking about here today. We do fully understand the need to ensure that enhanced means of transportation beyond just traditional vehicular traffic are going to be a requirement for this body in the coming comprehensive plan, and you'll see a considerable amount of that. Carrie, did I get it? Thank you.
Thank you. And I wonder if moving forward we could consider, having a study like this that maybe doesn't go into the great detail, because the resort is a very dense area and there are specialized needs there for visitors and for residents. But maybe we could have a similar type of study that looks at ways that we can improve connectivity, transportation, roadways, streetscapes in every area and within certain, not only strategic commercial areas, but also in neighborhoods.
Thank you, Councilmember. That's a great note. And I was remiss when I didn't recognize our colleagues in Park and Recreation who are on their 3rd iteration of the Virginia Beach Trail, which is also a key contributor to this effort as well.
I see Mr. Camp here and glad to see him. And I appreciate the work that they're doing very much. But maybe imagine what they could do with the type of funding support that came from a study like this.
Yes,
that can do for our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosemary?
So before you sit down, this kind of addresses a little bit what Michael's saying. It's my understanding too, on some of the flooding projects that we're doing, that there's going to be it's not just going to be fixing flooding, but when they go in there to do a project, there's also going to be enhancements for neighborhoods with some of these. That's what I'd heard with Windsor Woods and over in that area is.
I'm going to yield to the manager on that one.
So Vice Mayor and LJ can come up and clean up anything if necessary. But from my understanding, on most of our roadway projects, we do have an element of bike and pedestrian and trying to connect it all to get a more cohesive system. And you're correct, as we do our stormwater projects, especially if our stormwater projects leads to road improvements or road enhancements, we do tend to address those transportation issues as well.
And I know we have a policy that whenever we go in and redo a road, if possible, we add enough asphalt for bike lanes. That's our policy. I know a little bit about that one. And also when we are building new roads, that we're to accommodate our cyclists as well.
Yes, ma'am. And Walter's here with us today, and he made a very poignant statement when we got our giant checks the other day from the government that it wasn't really just the money that went to the Virginia Beach trail that was for multi-use. Each and every one of the transportation projects that we build has a bike and ped component in it. And we're always looking at what the other elements for multimodal connections are. So to answer your question, Councilman Berlucci, we are always looking at it. This particular study is unique to this particular area because of the nature of the things that Kyle identified, the fact that there is such a unique use of the infrastructure on Atlantic Avenue for so many different purposes. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Barbara and then Amelia.
Well, since we've gotten beyond just the oceanfront, it's okay, I think, if I make a comment about the whole issue of safety on our roads. And, you know, there's been several articles in the last few days, particularly about the past year, but the number of fatalities is unacceptable. And some of these articles, and I guess the data for the last year is not quite in yet, you know, talks about the difference in the number of fatalities for bicyclists and pedestrians and motorcyclists and vehicles. And there's a larger number within that pedestrian, bicyclist, motorcycle segment. Somehow or other, it's just not acceptable. And I don't know how we address it, but I think the whole issue of safety is something that's really important. And I know down at the oceanfront, there has been a lot of concern about, you know, making sure the pedestrian markings are prominent and so forth. But overall, I think we have to deal with it, not just at the oceanfront.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Okay, Amelia?
Well, I concur with Michael about the whole, because when I went and watched the freebie, for example, and how well it's being used, not only the SeaTac area for tourists, and I like the way it lifts up as it steps there, but the citizens, the residents in there are using it, and I can see this applicable for along where we are, because many people, we have the Williams Farm, we have that whole group along the historic that cannot get there because our busing, even though I'm on that transportation, does not have a direct. So some of this can be looked at for having something like that for those people who rarely have to wait for the bus, or their kids have to try to find their way across there. And then the second thing I wanted to bring up about the serpent, I was imagining a few people who've had a couple of drinks and the road is doing this. What do you say about that? The road is not straight, if what you're showing me is going to curve.
Yes, ma'am. Before I turn it over to Kyle quickly.
As I looked at it and I saw somebody going along there.
Yes, ma'am. Before I turn it over to Kyle, one thing I want to thank you for the comment as it relates to the success of freebie at the resort, and also I'd be remiss at this point if I didn't mention, of course, in the northwest portion of the city, we've been testing, of course, microtransit with HRT, which is a very similar program. That's a pilot that's coming to its end, but we are examining sort of an expansion of that to potentially advance to you all for consideration in this budget. But we do agree that you're right, that given the nature of our community, that there is a need to be focused on enhancing or on alternative means of public transportation in parts of the city that are less served. And I want to thank you for that before I turn it over to Kyle.
Can you clarify your question for me in terms of like just what specifically on the curvilinear? Or is it a safety question or concern, or can you clarify that for me?
Something like for Barbara, the safety, because you know you're used to the straight and narrow. And I was watching this serpentine as you showed it on the screen, and I can see at midnight or whatever, some people out there and not used to the sudden curving. Is it a sharp curve? Is it just gradually? But because we're looking at it from the screen, it looks like.
And if I may, ma'am, part of what we do when we talk about, we use keywords of traffic calming. it's important to note that a straight road, while is convenient for the driver, is often one of the most dangerous roads because a straight road with no obstructions on it causes vehicles and drivers to drive faster. So what you'll hear a lot of times when we talk about how to make a road safer is actually to add parking on the side because it affects the driver's behavior. One of the other things that we can do, and one of the things that was employed here, was the concept of traffic calming, moving the lane slightly. It's not sharp curves. It's not something that the driver would have a difficult time navigating. It's also important to note that the speed limit on Atlantic is a very low speed. So it shouldn't be anything that poses the challenges to the operator. In fact, it should be something that motivates the drivers to keep a low speed and make it safer for all of the other forms of transportation that are on the street.
Thank you.
Yeah, lighting, streetscape, the vertical elements, like we talked about, similar to the sense of arrival, that the street and the way we shift the street it will create will also contribute to that traffic calming element. I'd encourage you to take a look either just on Google Maps or Google Street View at Main Street in Hendersonville, North Carolina. That was a project they started about 12 years ago. It was a 4-lane straight roadway right through the middle of the heart of their downtown. They took away 2 of the lanes, and in doing so, created this curvilinear, and it's won all kinds of national awards. It's got tremendous streetscape elements to it. It has just totally transformed the businesses in that community through there. So give that a look if you have a moment. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at what the street looks like. But that was the idea behind the concept of where that came from.
Good. Anyone else? Yeah, I just want to thank you all very much, and I think it really highlights the importance. If I could just bring 2 points. The resort is very important to us economically in a lot of ways. We had that report how it really positively impacted residential properties throughout the city. And but the thing is that saying as somebody who used to be a district guy for 14 years. We want the resort to be welcoming to everybody, including our own residents, like Michael and all the other district, definitely district reps now, would say we want them to know that the beach is theirs also. The idea is to get them here, but once again, to highlight, parking and, the other problems that, come up. As we kind of transition, for lack of better terms, to a year-round scenario here. With the sports center has been a great boom to a year round. Atlantic Park is going to do the same thing. More people living out of here. Improving Atlantic Avenue. Some of the sidewalks, not inviting, the 20th Street South, they still have utility marks that they can't get rid of. But improving the overall picture, I think would benefit everybody. But once again, I think Michael brings up a point that, we're a city, so mobility is going to be key going forward. Michael?
Mayor, you made great points, but you reminded me of something that I wanted to talk about.
Oh, thank you for letting me remember.
You are really onto something. As I was walking down Atlantic Avenue just a week or so ago, particularly there's an area right around the Hilton Hotel that looks like somebody shot a confetti gun and all of the confetti stayed on the pavement and the bricks. And these are utility markings. It looks like some kind of a mural, some kind of contemporary art mural done by someone who doesn't know how to do it very well. It's a mess. And Mayor, I think that's what you were alluding to. We have talked about this at multiple council meetings. And I was trying to remind myself when I was walking by this, it really bothers me because I was trying to figure out, are these new markings or are these the same markings that have been there for probably now 2 or 3 years? And how can we as a city invest in this public infrastructure? Beautiful brick pavers, interesting surfaces, to create this welcoming environment. And then the utility companies come in, which I'm told they're authorized to do by the Commonwealth, and leave these crazy markings that look terrible all over the resort, particularly bad in that area that I mentioned. I mean, if you haven't walked down there, walk down that sidewalk, please, and look at these markings. It's unacceptable because the city has spent millions and millions and millions of taxpayer dollars to make this place warm and welcoming, and the utilities come in and they ruin it, and then it stays that way. Now, the last conversation I had about this, and I believe you were there, Mr. Adams, they told us, this was one utility company said, we only do that if we're gonna come in and do work and then it's fixed. I don't believe that because I was recalling how offensive these, and I know we're going along on time and I apologize, I'll wrap it up. But we've got to do something about this because we could talk about this plan till we're blue in the face and spend all kinds of money, millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars on these projects. And the utilities companies are going to come in with those markings and ruin it, and it's going to stay there for years like the one that did on 30. I'm very passionate about this because it bothers me, because it's our money that's funding these projects, and they're ruining it.
Councilmember, thank you. Perhaps we could have planning and public works do a little research on this and something for your Friday packet with some potential steps forward, or just maybe a current review of the environment and the rules that we have and why
That's good. Let's go ahead and move forward at this point.
If they can't, if we need to know, if it's state law, then our state delegation needs to know what they're doing to our resort.
Thank you, Councilman.
At this point, we got to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Okay, rec centers modernization.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, if council recalls, in your last reconciliation and the last budget process, council gave staff some direction to look at our rec center modernization plan and talk about historically how we used to finance it and to lay out some options, not necessarily recommendations, but options on how it could possibly finance in the future. In addition, we're covering a couple of topics as well. I think some council members have been briefed by the CTAC community about their desire for not just a modernized rec center, but a new rec center. So we're putting examples in there as well of what that could look like, in addition to talking about the Centerville Rec Center. The goal of this presentation, in addition to achieving what council asks for reconciliation, is to lay a groundwork for conversations during the retreat so that council can let us know if this is something they want us to move forward with in terms of modernizing our rec centers.
Okay, thank you. Michael.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, congratulations to all the newly appointed and elected officials, as well as the re-elected. Good to see everybody. My name is Michael Kirschman, Director of Parks and Recreation. I'm going to tag team this presentation with Kevin Chatelier. He'll talk finances, and I'll give a brief recap of where we came from, where we are, the needs moving forward, and Kevin will provide at least one option for funding this. So, as the manager stated, around a year ago, when council passed the budget, there was a lot of talk about the modernization plan, which was done back in 2020. We're going to talk about this. It was a very in-depth analysis on the 4 older rec centers, as well as we did a study on Centerville as well, which we'll touch upon. We actually put in the budget last year a request to start the first center. That was not funded. But during the reconciliation process, council directed staff to come up with a plan for at least an option for council to consider on how to move this forward if they so desire. So that's where we are now. We've been spending quite a few months researching this, and we have at least something to consider at this time. So really quick, I think everybody here is probably familiar with our recreation centers. The very first one, Kempsville, opened back in 1977. And as you probably know, it's reaching about 6 years old right now. It was completely rebuilt and reopened in 2017. This community has a long history of investing in health and wellness and public recreation centers for many, many years. And you can see the dates where all this happened. We're going to be focusing on Great Neck, which opened in 1990. Bayside in 92, Princess Anne in 94. We internally call those the big 3. They all look exactly the same, right? They were all built 2 years apart. The exact same floor plan, exact same design, built one after another, as well as SeaTac in 1977. The other 3 rec centers have all been completely redone or are brand new within the past 10 years or so, starting with Williams Farm in 2012. So a little bit of history about how the recreation centers are funded. So as you may be aware, back in the mid-1980s, the public actually passed a referendum to fund the construction of the first recreation centers, Bayside, Princess Anne, and Great Neck. That was for 3.8 cents on a dedicated tax rate for these centers, both the maintenance and operation. It was then increased to 4.6 cents in 1988 to include CTAC. Now, just we're gonna go back to one. You can see that Williams Farm came along in 2012. That center was added, but the dedication was never increased. So we absorbed the cost to construct and operate that center. Now, just because though the dedication has gone down over the years, so you can see it started at 4.6, dropped to 3.8. It is currently down to 3.7 and has been that way for roughly the last 15 years. The actual revenues we receive as a department have fluctuated over time because it's based on property values. Does that make sense? So to put it in a little perspective here, many years ago, things were going very well in the city. Sometimes property values went up as high as 20%. And what happened was the city would reduce the overall tax rate from $1.22 to 89 cents. When they reduced the tax rate, they made proportional reductions to all of the dedications. So that impacted both the rec center dedication, the agricultural reserve program. They were all reduced by the proportion when the tax rate was lowered. So while our tax rate has stayed the same, again, our overall revenues, tax revenues we receive from the city fluctuate over time. What do we get? What does the public get for this investment? Well, let me just say that I've been here about 5 years now, and without a doubt, Virginia Beach has one of the best public recreation center systems in the country, hands down. We routinely have other cities come and visit us, tour our recreation center system to find out how we did it, how they can do it, what does it cost, how can I make it happen. One of the ways it's so successful here is because there's dedication, there's dedicated funding for this. We have extremely high customer satisfaction rates with these centers. We have 1.5 million people visits per year walking the doors. Utilization rates are through the roof. The centers themselves bring in about a little over $7 million per year in direct earned revenues, offsetting the need for tax dollars. So we have this, the city has this history of investing and reinvesting in the health and wellness and public recreation systems. And we've done that for years, and we did that over the past decade on the 3 older ones that were all redone. The challenge we face now moving forward is, are we going to and how are we going to continue reinvesting in the older buildings? Just like the aquarium, I guess the term of the day is aging infrastructure. We have aging infrastructure. And I will just tell one quick story, because just 2 weeks ago, I was at Bow Creek Rec Center playing pickleball, which I'm sure you've all heard of. That's one of the fastest growing recreational sports out there. So I play pickleball. The person I'm playing with has no idea who I am, right? And it was an older gentleman and his wife, and we were talking about pickleball, and I was just happening to tell him, oh, do you come to Bow Creek often? And he says this. He says, we retired a few years ago. We could have gone anywhere in the country. We looked at many other cities to move to, but no other city had the rec centers we have here, and so we decided to stay. Now, that's just one anecdotal comment from one person, but the impacts that our rec centers have on our population is vast. It both attracts people to come here and retains them to stay based on the quality of life they receive from these centers. So it's just a phenomenal system of recreation centers. Now, moving forward, when Kevin starts talking about the budget, I want you to keep one number in mind, and that is $3.9 million. So as we kind of kicked around and thought about how could the city potentially fund the renovation and modernization of the 4 older rec centers, as well as potentially an 8th rec center for upward consideration, we started looking at what does the current dedicated rec center funds go to. And the reality is, what has happened over the years is that the dedicated funding for rec centers has been used to cover non-recreation center park and recreation services. That's great. It's saving the general fund. It's saving the tax rate, right? But really what's happening is we have numerous areas of operation, the entire summer youth employment program, the youth opportunities office, all sports and athletics, Little Island Park operations, Lynn Haven Boat and Beach facility, all of the internal department operations, budget, finance, HR, marketing, director's office, planning. All these functions are being 100% covered by the rec center dedication, but yet they aren't rec centers, right? So we added up how much all of this costs, how much is coming from the dedicated funding to cover these other park and rec services, and that number is roughly $3.9 million. So keep that number in mind because Kevin's going to be talking more about that in a little bit. So back in 2020, we gave a presentation to council. Chad Morris is here, Administrator for Capital Planning. We have copies of this presentation that was given to the council at the time. We're happy to pass those out. I'm going to spend 3 slides in 3 minutes covering what is a huge, in-depth study, as well as what was an hour presentation back then. But we hired a national consultant to come in and look at our older buildings. They did site analysis on all the building components. They looked at all the structural components, floors, roof systems, interior ceilings, windows, pool components, pumps, filters, fire protection systems, electrical systems, concrete, steel framing, brick and mortar. They looked at these buildings up and down. And then they determined what was needed. So they determined kind of what you're going to cost to fix up what you have, as well as if you want to go new, what that's going to run. And we have copies of this report for anybody who would like it. So that was back in 2020. Here's what we determined. To do nothing, to keep these 4 older buildings, we're just talking right now about the big 3, all right? Great Neck, Bayside, and Princess Anne, as well as SeaTech. To do nothing, to keep the same old buildings, cinder block construction, no new upgrades, not keep them current with recreational trends, keep those buildings operating as long as possible. We need $36 million in 2020 dollars, pre-COVID dollars, right? We need $36 million over the next 12 to 13 years, which currently we don't have programmed into the CIP budget or have in the bank. So that is the do nothing scenario. That also does not include any of the capital replacements for the newer buildings, which are starting to have issues, nor does it include our yearly emergency operations. Right now, we budget $2 million per year for the rec center CIP, which Chad manages, and that is insufficient, but that replaces equipment, fitness equipment, patches. We have the slide at Williams Farm that's deteriorating and needs replaced. That's $500,000. So we have all these issues every year. That $2 million just goes to this daily maintenance, capital maintenance and replacement. Okay, so the top slide there shows for the capital renewals only, to maintain what we have at these facilities in 2020 dollars, the city would need to invest $36 million to keep those buildings going. If we want to upgrade these buildings akin to a Bow Creek, Kempsville, not total tear downs, but these would be guts, similar footprint, maybe small expansions of the footprint. We have multiple variations on how that works. We're looking at roughly $82 million for the big 3, right? SeaTac is somewhat the wild card. SeaTac has a price tag anywhere from $6 million to $56 million, depending on whether you're going to do minor modernization and upgrades at the current facility where it is on site, which is greatly constrained by how much we can do there. Or we also looked at numerous alternatives in terms of building an entirely new recreation center in the SeaTac area, akin to a Williams Farm or even larger. The price tag for that center ranges based on the size of the facility you would build and the type of amenities you would put in that. We looked at everything from adding a 50-meter pool to adding a branch library along with it, because they would want to consolidate the oceanfront library and doing a joint facility, to just a standalone rec center such as Williams Farm within the SeaTac area. So you'll see that the SeaTac modernization plan has a wide range of options, anywhere from $6 million to just do upgrades on site at the existing building, to anywhere from $40 million to $56 million to build an entirely new facility in that area. Again, these are $20. I would say add 20% onto those. Yes, Kevin's saying yes from a budget perspective based on inflation and rising costs. When we look at the timing, if the city was interested in reinvesting in the facilities and doing really what needs to get done to make sure that they are viable and attractive facilities moving forward for future generations, timing becomes critical. We can actually save operational dollars if they are done back to back to back, the same way we did them originally back in the early 1990s, 90, 92, 94. So while you close one building, many of those staff are relocated to the other facilities, vacancies aren't filled, part-timers aren't needed, and then your true new operational costs don't go up until the last one was built 6, 7, 8 years later. So that would be for the big three. As soon as one opens, reopens, the next one closes, right? So you only have one center closed at a time during this process.
And Michael, if you can excuse me 1 second.
Yes.
I just want to take a point of privilege to introduce Sheriff Stolley and his magnificent crew from the Sheriff's Department that have joined us this afternoon. Thank you. And police, and Chief Newdigate. Oh, sorry. You're over in the euchre seats. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. You got it. They'll be talking to us next, but Michael,
Great.
Thank you for the interruption.
Sure, no problem. The other, of course, rec center is SeaTac. SeaTac, if a new center was built at a new location, would not impact closings because that center could stay open while a new one's being built, and that construction timeline could float anywhere along this 8 to 10 year timeline, if that makes sense. I mentioned that we also did a Centerville study. So again, that was a whole separate study. The same consultant did it. There was a lot of talk back a few years ago at a potential 8th recreation center. We looked at numerous properties. We only looked at properties that were managed and controlled by Parks and Recreation. We even looked at partnerships next door with Chesapeake in terms of a joint facility between two cities. We explored all kinds of options. We narrowed it down to a preferred site. And so you will see here that if the city ever wanted to build a new 8th rec center in the Centerville area, you're looking at a price tag of anywhere from this is just the 30,000 foot view, $37 million to $70 million in 2020 dollars. Again, based on the size of the facility, right? The square footage and the amenities that go with it. And you can see we looked at about 5 different options. Again, everything from joint rec center libraries to a rec center with a 50-meter pool that you could do competitions, as well as tons of learn to swim programs. We certainly need more pool and all different types of square foot. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well. Even though that wasn't part of council's directive last year, I want to let you know that study and that number is out there as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to the budget office to talk about, okay, we know what it costs if the city wants to reinvest and continue our kind of legacy of excellence in recreation centers here. We know what that's going to cost and take. How can we make that happen?
Hey, Kevin, how are you? The answer man.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, thank you. A lot of the things that Michael covered makes it very transparent that the Parks and Rec system, albeit is fantastic, it's also complex. There's a lot of multiple funding scenarios that had to take place to conduct this analysis. So before you hear on this slide is a set of assumptions that we had to work through over the several weeks and last couple of months that we've been looking at this. So I just wanted to kind of touch on a few of them. Being the first bullet point, this is the one that Michael was referencing, the $3.9 million. So historically within the Parks and Rec Special Revenue Fund, there are set programs that have historically been viewed as 100% general fund funded. So the general fund provides a transfer over to the Parks and Rec Special Revenue Fund annually. So that $3.9 million that Michael's talking about is us taking a fresh look at it and seeing how close that transfer is to what those programmatic costs actually are. So that was included as a baseline assumption in the following scenarios I'm about to cover. Some other things, the project costs, Councilmember Joke coming up saying he wants $20. I did apply an inflationary factor with this, being that some of these projects are still that staggered approach that Parks and Rec was talking about, still 9 years away. Inflation certainly does play an impact on these project costs. Again, if they're staggered on a 2-year timeline. And in terms of revenues, I had to make some assumptions in terms of the overall fund's revenue growth. So baseline revenues, operational revenues, fees, programmatic fees, they're assumed to increase by 1% annually, with real estate through the dedication assumed to occur at 3%, which is the historical growth rate of that revenue. So whenever I talk about the growth of the real estate, it's not necessarily growing the rate as part of the baseline, but as Michael was talking about, the overall assessment growth or the organic growth that occurs within the city, Parks and Rec receives the benefit of that through its existing dedication. So that was assumed to continue. Some operating budget impacts. These are more specific to the two scenarios related to a CTAC and Centerville Rec Center. And I'll talk about those more in a little bit, but we had to assume those in here. And then debt service is assumed to occur at 4.5% interest. So jumping into it and looking at the scenario, so the slide here is taking a snapshot look at all the existing facilities, as Michael said, the big three, as well as CTAC. So the first scenario there, and I'll take a moment to walk across and get familiar with this, is a minimum maintenance scenario. So this is what Michael was talking about of, okay, if we were to just accelerate and do the capital replenishment and replacement needs over the next 9-year period, what would that look like? So it'd be an additional investment of about $40-something million. And so in looking at the gap and what impact that would have on the special revenue fund, one way to consider to balance and potentially close that funding gap could be the baseline adjustment I was previously talking about of a true up from the general fund of $3.9 million for those general fund funded programs. And then they increase in the dedicated real estate tax assessment dedication that is directed to the Parks and Rec Special Revenue Fund of 0.2 cents. That's equivalent to about $1.5 million. So if this were to be implemented in FY24, it would result in a increased contribution to Parks and Rec Special Revenue Fund about $5.4 million. So the next scenario down is stepping out and actually doing a renovation and replacement of those 4 existing facilities with a similar footprint. They would certainly be modernized to look like Williams Farm and the other rec centers, but it would be done on a similar size footprint, not expanding, not a new facility. So assuming the same baseline assumptions with baseline adjustment of $3.9 million, an additional tax dedication increase of 0.6 cents would be needed to have the fund be sustainable over the next 20 plus years. That equate to about $4.2 million increase. Or if this were to be implemented in FY24, total increase in Parks and Rec fund about $8.1 million. So that scenario is looking at the existing facilities. This one is going to, as Michael covered, there's a lot of different scenarios and options to consider. So, and I think the city manager set the stage of these are just things to consider as possibilities, as there's still a lot of unknowns in terms of the specific direction to go with some of these facilities. So Looking at this slide, the top line there, the renovation of existing facilities, that's a carryover from the previous slide. So this is kind of the baseline. Okay, well, if we were to renovate the 4 big facilities, and then what would happen if the decision was made to expand CTAC to basically be the equivalent of a new facility? So this is kind of a layered up approach to go that route. You can see the plus a new CTAC, which would be a significant expansion, about a $55 million additional investment. So that would require a baseline of adjustment of about $3.9 million, and an increase in the dedication of about 0.8 cent or $6.1 million for a total investment if this were to be invested or implemented in FY24, about $9.9 million. So something else to take into consideration is if there were to be investment like that, an expansion of the facility to basically be a new facility, there would be an additional operating budget impact associated with that. Bigger footprint, more staff, more programs, more services. So that was built into here, and that's assumed to be an additional $1 million a year to begin and be phased in about 6 months prior to the opening of the facility. The last scenario here is the cumulative effect. So renovating the existing facilities, the new CTAC, and then if a new Centerville Rec Center was to be constructed. So again, building off everything, the baseline adjustment would be needed of $3.9 million, total dedication increase of 1.5 cents on the real estate tax dedication, or about $10.7 million. And if this were to be implemented in FY24, additional investment of about $14.6 million. Related to the operating budget impact of that, there's no net operating budget impact. There's an existing CTAC, so expanding it results in only a need of additional assumed $1 million. But if a new facility were to be constructed, it would require the full operating budget impact, which is estimated to be about additional $3 million a year. So that's incorporated in the scenario planning as well. So I would not be a very good budget person if I didn't give some caveats and give myself some wiggle room, because there's a lot of assumptions that went into this, and trying to look 10 to 20 years out in the future, a lot of things could change. Certainly inflation could change, the construction timeline of the projects could change. There could be some operating budget impacts that we weren't anticipating. If I didn't assume an adequate growth in staffing levels to maintain current services, that could certainly have a negative impact, as well as the revenues. So I mentioned that, talked about the Parks and Rec revenue fees going up an additional 1% per year as a baseline assumption. Should that fluctuate, that could certainly have an impact on the overall needs of the fund, as well as the growth of the real estate dedication. So with that being said, I'm done with the funding scenario portion, but I think there's going to be a handoff to one more. It's a budget by, our presentation by committee. And Chad Morris is going to come up from Parks and Rec and talk about some of the things that Parks does that is outside of the funding streams and the programs that we were previously talking about.
So Chad's going to take over, but we wanted to give you the picture on the cost for the rec centers. But again, the city manager definitely wanted to show as well what are the other needs of Parks and Rec, because rec centers are one component of Parks and Recreation. So just one slide, and Chad's going to talk about the other things coming down the pike or currently going to be hitting you during the budget process.
Thanks, Michael. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. Do have just one last slide for today's briefing, and that we do definitely want to address and explain that the capital needs of the Parks and Recreation Department goes beyond that of the Recreation Center's modernization. And we just wanted to spend one minute sharing some of the parks needs that we have that need some additional funding to look at. First of that being the deferred maintenance and backlog of the existing park infrastructure. That currently stands at about $30 million and growing. Though last year, council did allocate some funding through the ARPA funding to the department. We're very grateful for that. That puts a small dent in that backlog. We're still tracking it probably still being about a $20 million backlog, but that does certainly help. Also, what we categorize as undeveloped park properties. There's lots of properties, just about 40 are intended to be built out as park infrastructure and amenities for the community. However, those properties, some of them have been sitting idle with nothing on them for decades, some 10, 20, 30 years, some almost 40 years, that are intended and waiting to be developed as park infrastructure. Also, some properties in the ramp up of the open space acquisition program. There'll be more properties coming online. Some of those will also need some park infrastructure, some of it minimal for access and things like that. Others could be developed more robustly for provide other recreational amenities. But there is currently not a funding mechanism to build those parks out. And then the next category is the underdeveloped parks. There's about 90 parks. Those are typically the neighborhood parks. You've seen them when you stroll up in a neighborhood. There's typically a playground and a small shelter, and that's it. But there is lots of opportunity to provide a more diversity of park amenities for all ages and all abilities in those spaces, and provide a bigger variety of recreation needs that the community are really asking for. And then there's the bikeways and trails, and this is timely because we talked about this a little bit today. The VB Trail, and then the active transportation plan, and the dollars needed to really spark and implement the strategy behind the council adopted 2020 active transportation plan. The first big priority obviously being the VB Trail, and we've been working hard on that. We're grateful for the $750,000 federal allocation that was sent our way. That's a great jump start for that. We also will hear, hopefully by the end of the month, about the SS4A grant, Safe Streets for All, that we should be hearing the results of if we were or were not funded for that. That's more of a $12 to $15 million grant, which will really get the phase one of the VB Trail rolling. So we're excited about that. And if we don't receive that grant, we're ready to turn around and apply for the 2023 RAISE grant to get that moving along as well. All this will be bundled up in a nice package. We're working with a consultant to help us prioritize and develop all this, and really look at this through an equity lens and see how we can strategize to really get the needs of recreation in the park system out to the communities and throughout everyone's districts through a parks needs assessment and development strategy. So we have a consultant on board to do that. We should be getting a strategy and implementation and ideas in the next couple of months. So with that, thank you all for your time today, and we will be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions at this point? Okay, Barbara?
Just comments, I guess. Well, I think it's important that we do look at the entirety of parks and recreation, and not just the recreation centers. I think the recreation centers are our crown jewels, and we'd like for every one of them to look like Williams Farm. But the reality is that's extremely expensive, and not only to build, but to operate. And so we really do have to look at the entirety. But one of the things that I think is important, if we're particularly going to be talking about the rec centers, if you could provide a map that locates each of the rec centers.
Sure.
I think it would be very telling, because I think we see them concentrated, and we see a major part of the city that isn't close to a rec center. And I think I know with our parks, our intent was that we had something within a 10-minute walk of every neighborhood or some such.
Correct.
Well, I think we need to kind of look at how well everything is applying. And it may be that instead of a rec center, there's some other major park amenity that better serves a part of the city. But I think we really ought to look at the location of everything. And maybe, yeah, I can see, and by the way, the Princess Anne Rec Center is no longer in the Princess Anne District or whatever, District 2, it's in District 5, I think.
We didn't move the lines, Barbara.
But I really think maybe, I can certainly see that the existing recreation centers need to be retained at what they are. I mean, very large and so forth, but it may be that we look at building smaller recreation centers in these parts of the city that don't have anything now. So I think that should be a consideration. I mean, not everything has to be really big and everything. It may be that those are the central ones, and we have some smaller ones scattered around in some of the areas that are that are really not even served by
Some
a
of the
rec
gap
center.
areas, sure.
Like satellites.
Satellite rec centers. Yeah, so if we could look at those kinds of things, but I do think we have to look at the entirety and just how much money, because especially when we start talking about raising taxes and then dedicating that as a funding source, that's a big thing. And we've heard about the need for the aquarium. We're going to hear about the need for a law enforcement training center. We've got a lot of needs, and we're just going to have to prioritize. We'd like to have it all, but we can't.
Yep.
So give us some choices.
Great, thank you. Amelia?
I hope Josh will tag team on this for me, because what we're talking about in Aragona and talking about Jericho, and they are looking at this really elderly group, and where they're looking at, I think it's taking that, and they're hoping that it will get a small rec area that, they're able to handle.
Well familiar with that. I think one of my first meetings here, I believe Vice Mayor Wilson was there, and we met at Bow Creek with the community regarding that. Yes.
For the elderly, that's adjusted for them.
Hey, anybody else? Hey, yeah, Sabrina.
Mr. Kirschman, could you talk about, in terms of the rec center in Kempsville, I want to make sure I understand that correctly, but it's my understanding that that rec center is very popular.
Kempsville is our #1 visited and highest utilized facility by far.
And used very often, and sometimes it's hard for residents to take advantage of some of the amenities that are available. One in point that I know is swimming. Sometimes it's difficult because there's so many folks. But it's my understanding that a rec center in District 7, formerly Centerville, would kind of take some of that pressure off. Is that correct?
That is correct. So Kempsville is by far our busiest rec center, most scans, most members, most people through the door. As nice as Kempsville is, and Kempsville is nice. As nice as Kempsville, and probably our #1 complaint at Kempsville is, hey, I came and I couldn't even get on a treadmill. At peak times, it is very crowded. That's our #1 complaint. So certainly our study showed that if another center was built in that area, it would both serve a new community as well as take pressure off of Kempsville. Our second most visited rec center is Princess Anne, but to put it in perspective, Princess Anne doesn't come close to Kempsville, let alone all the rest. Kempsville is just in a high density. The whole Kempsville, Centerville area is a very high density part of the city, and so serves a lot of people. So everything you said is correct. A new center would relieve the pressure on Kempsville. When it comes to pool time is at a premium across all the centers. In fact, I recently just had a complaint about lack of pool time at SeaTac. So even the SeaTac pool is crushed, and it's a small pool too. And sometimes people from other centers, or that typically go to other centers, will go to SeaTac to swim or do their lanes. But when a couple do that, or when our partners and law enforcement are doing a training at SeaTac, it can impact customer satisfaction as well. Pool time's at a premium. One of our most successful programs is Students on the Swim. Started in 5 schools. It's up to 26 schools, all second graders. We would like to do all 56 elementary schools. All second graders go through a 2-week Learn to Swim program. It's Virginia Beach. We're surrounded by water. Drowning is a leading cause of death for certain ages. Our limiting factor with that program is lack of pool time during the day. So once we have another pool, we can.
Okay, at that point, thank you all very much. Appreciate it. And boy, we're going to have an interesting budget session.
Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
All right, so Mayor, members of council, the next presentation will be provided by our Public Works Director with a combination of support from the Police Department and the Sheriff's Department. This is our Law Enforcement Training Academy. And as you all know, this is currently in a former elementary school that is currently inadequate for the services that it provides. It's also getting to a point where the lease is set to expire in about 2.5, 3 years. So it's going to be something that we hope to discuss with City Council in terms of what do we do next with our Lido facility.
Hey, welcome. Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. As you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, I do have Chief Newdigate and Sheriff Stolley here with me to help talk about any issues that this may be posing for them from an operational or readiness standpoint. The Law Enforcement Training Academy, or we all call it LETA, is located in the old Princess Anne Elementary School. And so I recognize we're short on time. I'll do my best to move through these slides as quickly as I can, but briefly I want to tell you a little bit about how we got where we are, some of the issues that we're experiencing, where we stand today, and then hopefully have a short discussion. From a background standpoint, as I mentioned, the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department have used the old SeaTac Elementary School for training purposes since 2000. It was envisioned to be a temporary location. This being 2023, 23 years seems like more than temporary. LETA is one of the training facilities that we have. We have the Creeds facility. We also do some firing range work down in Carolina. But for the most part, most of our training occurs at the old SeaTac Elementary. The facility itself is unchanged since it was an elementary school, and that poses a number of problems. Some of the issues that we have, this being a building that's over 50 years old, as you can imagine, we have some structural problems with the building. Also, it's worth noting that this facility was never retrofit to be a training facility for adults. So it does cause us some problems. We have problems with noise, and we have problems with water intrusion as well. And this last bullet, I want to make sure that I make a special point to note. This was an elementary school that was built in the 1950s. We have in there today police officers, and while they are police officers, they still require an element of safety and security, and this facility offers really very little in regards to that for them. Understand also that they have some specialized equipment in there, and it's not set up for that type of thing. I mentioned the age. Again, besides the flooding, there's also water that comes in. I'm going to show you some pictures here in just a minute, but I also wanted to make sure that you understood that this building is not just used for law enforcement training purposes. It's also a community center, and it also has a number of other purposes that it gets used for, as it is key to the SeaTac community. Having said that, there's no dedicated space in it for any of those purposes. The police department, the sheriff's department, they work with the community and they do their best to make the space available. So, okay. As I mentioned, it being a 50-year-old facility, you can see from some of the pictures here, we're starting to experience some issues with structure issues and also some issues with just the envelope. The envelope meaning the brick and that type of thing. And you can tell that we're having issues with that based upon the staining that we're seeing between the bricks. In other words, water's getting in behind the brick structure, and it's going to cause additional structural issues as we move forward. This is the classroom setting. And you know, I looked at the pictures of the Parks and Rec site, and I was a little frustrated because my department is in charge of maintenance. And one of the things that I really hope that you see here is that both the sheriff's department, the police department, and the maintenance department, they're doing everything they can to maintain a serviceable condition. The carpets are in place, the furniture is whole, it's not broken. But on whole, if you look at this space, we're using 1970s technology to educate our 21st century police department. That's a projection slide on a tripod, and we're using basically the same technology that I had in the 1970s when I was in elementary school to try and teach our officers. This is not what we would consider to be adequate technology for education in this setting. This is the area behind LETA as it stands today. This is where officers are doing some of their calisthenics and their physical conditioning. Again, we have buckled asphalt. We have facilities that are just really not suited for this. They probably would have worked 25, 30 years ago, but at this point, they're just not appropriate anymore. You can see here, we're starting to see some issues with water intrusion. That area on the left, that's a patch that has been patched over multiple times where moisture has gotten in. Again, our building maintenance staff are doing all that they can do to keep the facility serviceable and still operating, but it is becoming an issue where it's just difficult to stay on top of it. The picture on the right shows issues as a result of aged infrastructure from the electrical and from the IT standpoint. That gray box to the right of the chair there, I think you'll all remember that from the old city council conference room, or from the old city council chambers rather. Those are dehumidifiers, and they're scattered throughout in order to keep the moisture down. This facility, this is an example of some of the issues that we have with the facility being constructed for elementary age children. These are restroom facilities that were constructed for elementary age children, not for grown adults. Again, I go back to, this was a facility that was intended to be used as a temporary purpose, and it was never retrofit to be serviceable for adults. And again, just age playing its role. The breaker panel on the right, you can see the age of the paper, identifying which circuit breakers go to which, and just the age of the overall floor and condition. So hopefully I've given you all a very good idea of what the conditions are at LIDA. The part of the issue that we've struggled with is the fact that we don't actually own the land. When I say we, I mean we, the city, and specifically facilities, is unsure about what the condition with the land is. The land was, because it was an elementary school, it has been leased back to the city for this purpose since the year 2000, and it was expected to retire in 2020. At the conclusion of the lease in 2020, we began a series of one-year leases that will expire in 2025, May 31st of 2025. Now, it's not a cost issue. We're only paying $1 a year for that lease. So it's not a matter of financial, but it does leave us in this predicament about where does LIDA go? Is it the best case that we would put LIDA back at its existing location, or we would look at some other locations? And so we've done a little bit of work to try to identify this. And honestly, the work on the replacement for LIDA goes all the way back to 2014. At that point, a CIP was constructed, but it was never fully advanced. We've been given a number of stopgap measures to get us along. In 2019, we did a study to identify the space that would be required to accommodate both the sheriff's office and the police department. At that point, it was estimated to be about 60,000 square feet. I know that City Council has been briefed on the changes that have come as a result of just the dynamics of what the police and sheriffs have been going through for the last couple of years. Our class sizes have gotten bigger, so even that study from 2019 is somewhat dated. It's not something that we would have to throw out, but we would definitely want to go back and revisit it. Over the years 2019, 2022, we've looked at a number of different sites where we might be able to locate it. A lot of hay was made about potentially putting it at Leroy Road. I think ultimately, and I'll show you here in just a moment why, but ultimately I think we determined that Leroy Road doesn't really work. Other areas that were identified was its existing location, potentially putting it at Creed's. We've had a number of unsolicited submittals from third parties who've suggested we might be able to put LIDA in one of their areas that they'd like to sell to the city or find another means of arrangement with the city. But at this point, we have no determination as to where we would put it. I mentioned Leroy Road was one of the areas that we identified. And if you look from the upper left to the right, it's a series of closer and closer shots. But ultimately, what you'd see is we just don't have the space at Leroy Road. It wouldn't provide us enough space. The wetland issues would cause us some additional problems. Parking would not be satisfied. Leroy Road really just doesn't seem like it's the best place to put it, which means that on the whole, we have not identified a specific site that the city controls and that we would be able to put it on. Now, were we to reach agreement with schools to relocate it on its current site, there are a couple of different configurations, and our consultant kind of looked at that and did just some brief planning. But there are a number of different configurations, some of which would allow us to add potential community center or something like that if that was something to be considered. Other potential additions could occur at this location. So it allows us a little bit of latitude and a little bit of extra space to do a couple of different things. The one thing that's important to note is that at none of these locations have we looked at anything that would replace the firing range that we're currently doing in North Carolina. As we looked at costs, we prepared a cost estimate in 2020. The CIP at that time was estimated to be about $26 million. Boy, if only it's 26,000. $26 million.
A million here, a million there.
You know, it adds up, I hear. We anticipated that about $6 million would be necessary to purchase the existing location on Bird Neck, or at least the property value would be worth about $6 million. Since that fiscal year 20, some requirements for space have changed based upon, as again, have been briefed to City Council, the changes in how we're conducting our training, class sizes, and then, of course, we've recently done a briefing to City Council talking about the effects of inflation and where we are in construction market. At this point, we have not gone back and revised the estimate, mostly because it's a little bit difficult for us to get a very detailed estimate, not knowing where it would go. Any construction estimate that we would do would be based upon the soil conditions, what we'd have to do for stormwater and all those types of things. But based upon the estimate that we originally did back in 2020 at $26 million, we're estimating it'd probably be closer to about $34 million excluding land costs at this point. And again, those are very rough estimates. I would really hate to see that number show up nailed down in a CIP somewhere, but we feel like it's a pretty good estimate. At this point, as the manager said earlier, we're not asking City Council to make any recommendations today. We're bringing this information to you so that you have the best information as we move forward. We would welcome the opportunity to submit a CIP for some path forward on this, whether in part or in whole. And at this point, we're available for any questions, either myself, again, Sheriff Stolle, or Chief Newgate.
Rosemary.
Thanks so much, and thank you both for being here and your fan club. We've got to have a good place for our 21st century police force to train. I mean, we've got the best of the best, and we've got to put them in a good place. So, and I'm in that building frequently, and it really is pretty poor. But it does seem to me that land with the location of the interstate would be much better suited for an economic development project because it's so close to the interstate. I know that does it fit where we need to put it. So I know this. So what was wrong with Creeds? You didn't mention Creeds.
It was suggested, but I don't believe that we've ever given it a significant amount of consideration. I do know that there was some concern about its relative location to the other police precincts and its distance from the municipal center and those types of things. I think that there was some concern about that. But we have not investigated it. If I'm brutally honest, we would really kind of like to have some idea what this body would like us to investigate. We looked at it solely from a where could we put it, and it currently fits where it is today. We recognize that City Council is balancing many different needs, including economic development and vitality. I think it might be helpful for us to maybe have some insight as to what City Council would like to see.
How much land do you need?
It's a great question. That really kind of depends upon some of the other factors that we have at play. But given the footprint that we have right now, we're looking at about 6 acres.
And how much?
6.
About 6 to 10 acres would be ideal. Again, it goes back to how much are we going to need for stormwater? If we have to put a large BMP on the site, that just changes the answer. If we want to co-locate something like a community involvement, some type of a community participation part into this, that changes some of it. There really is a whole lot that goes into the decision and to the planning and structural layout, I guess.
And the problem is we're running out of land.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Rocky, I understand you have an interest in public safety.
I do. I think, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think an important piece to this is the firing range component. Right now, as you heard, the men and women of public safety are driving to Moyock to go to the range to qualify, And this is an hour one way just to get there. Many times it could be longer. So I think that as we talk about this training center, we need to find a way to incorporate that where our men and women don't have to go an hour down the road to qualify. And Chief, you got any comments on that? That's certainly the situation as it is now. Going to.
Yeah, Chief, stand up to the podium and then we'll let Sheriff Stoller go up.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, we also concur that we would like to take a look at maybe what a joint use facility. We are losing a number of dedicated training hours with 1 hour down, 1 hour back that we could put to great use. We have been very well accommodated by that facility down in Moyock, but we would love this council to take a look at something that we could consider a joint use facility.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Barbara.
Well, that's what didn't work at Creed's, was, when it had the firing range there. So, I mean, are we looking at an outside facility? Is that what's needed? Is that what they have at Moyock, or is it possible to do something that's inside?
I think we would need to look at probably both an indoor and outdoor range. I think there are some live fire training evolutions that can only be accomplished successfully from an outdoor facility. I think there is a lot that we can do from an indoor facility that would cut down on community concerns about noise and some of those other associated concerns that our community may have about live fire in their areas.
That's going to be difficult anywhere, if you're going to want it, because
Yes,
like I
ma'am.
say, it was at Creed's for years, but it got to be a real problem. And there's not too many places that have that kind of exclusion, because I guess it's got the bay on one side of it, so you were only looking at half, and clearly it created problems. So I don't know where else would give you the full capability. But Creed's was fine except for that, and I think folks love having the automotive training down there because they get to see the presence there.
Mr. Mayor and Ms. Henley, I think that you have to recognize that right now the police department and the sheriff's office have a separated system where we have the education taking place in one place and the shooting taking place in another place. And the problem is the hour to go down there. I think you could easily have a separated shooting house from the educational place in Virginia Beach. So you don't have to try and find one place that fits both needs. Because I agree with you, I think it would be very difficult. I remember the complaints that they were coming in about the shooting down there at Creed's, and I agree with you that we have to be very careful where we put the range. But I think we could separate them and have different, the classroom instruction at one place and the firing range at another place, if we could find a place, yeah.
Okay. Any other, Jack, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Chief, Mr. Sheriff. Just looking at these pictures and knowing what a fantastic job that you all do for our community, I just applaud you and your forces for just the professionalism that you exhibit on a day-to-day, and especially considering these conditions. So my question, I guess, to the mayor and to the body, and for the folks who've been here longer than my, I guess, 7 days here so far, is there some sort of a commission or an existing group where we might be able to take a look at this a little bit closer? Considering, I think I would love to hear. I mean, we can kind of think up where it might go, but what I'd really like to know is what are your needs operationally, and what do you need out of the facility, and where do you think it should go, so that we can take that into consideration?
Patrick.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of council, remember at this time, we don't need to solve the problem today. We were just kind of lay a baseline conversation so we can have more detailed conversations about this at the retreat. If council say we come out of that and council say 4 to 5 things we talked about today, and some of the things we're going to talk about next week, if you all say move forward with those, we can work on figuring out optimal location for stuff like that. We got ideas in mind and things that we can kick around and we can bring forward to you all for further review and consideration.
I think that would be the direction to go, to at least have options as we have going into the retreat possibly, but then also during budget discussions. I think that should be the direction. Everybody concur? Okay, thank you,
Mr.
Jeff.
Mayor, there's one thing I'd like to say. It's nice to see the new face of City Council and the old faces on city council too.
Some of us very old faces.
And getting older, getting older.
The option is not that good, Rosemary.
I know.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Danny.
Before we move forward with the next step, we do have the pending planning items presentation. We've already provided the information to you all in your Friday package, in your council package. Do you want staff?
Okay, do we really need anything? No, okay. But this way, let's go ahead and, skip it.
I do have one question, because I think that, I want to make sure the public is aware. We received a letter from the clerk about one of the items. Mr. Holt, Councilmember Holcomb, do you want to talk about that? If you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, and this is an important thing, I want to make sure the public is aware of what the most recent developments were, so that we can best prepare for the meeting on the 17th.
Yeah, and thank you, Councilmember Berlucci. And it is a big project we've heard a lot about. It's the Kemps River project, which is going to be a 322 unit apartment building. And we received a letter today, which I'm having trouble finding, from the
Carrie, you know about the letter? Can you come and brief the council on the letter and its contents?
Well, I think I gave you a copy of it, didn't I?
It's in his filing cabinet.
Thank you very much.
So Mayor and members of council, I think everybody knows Carrie. Carrie is the Deputy Director for the Planning Department.
Okay, hey, how are you?
Hi, good to see you. So yes, we received a letter today from the applicant's representative asking for an indefinite deferral so they can continue to do outreach to additional neighborhoods. They feel like they've addressed a lot of the concerns from the people they've already spoken with, but they would like to do some additional outreach.
I think that's a prudent way to go. Okay?
I think it is too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, we're gonna go into closed and in an expeditious way. The chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions from the open meeting allowed by sections 2.23711A, Code of Virginia as amended for the following purposes: personnel matters, discussions, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public employees, appointees, employees of public bodies pursuant to section 2.23711A1. Council appointees, boards, commissions, committees, authorities, and appointees. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Councilmember Berluci.
Aye.
Councilmember Henley.
Aye.
Councilmember Holcomb.
Aye.
Councilmember Rivers.
Aye.
Councilmember Ross Hammond.
Aye.
Councilmember Rouse.
Aye.
Councilmember Schulman.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Councilmember Booton.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wilson.
Aye.
Mayor Dyer.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourning into executive. motion to approve the closed session? Been motion and a second.
Councilmember Bellucci?
Aye.
Councilman Henley? Councilman Holcomb?
Aye.
Councilman Remick?
Aye.
Councilman Montana?
Aye.
Councilman Rouse?
Aye.
Councilman Coleman?
Aye.
Councilman Taylor?
Aye.
Councilman Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wilson? Aye. Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
I vote 11 yeas, to go into closed session meeting.
And we're out ahead of 6 o'clock. Go figure. Good luck, Charms.